Let me go ahead and call this meeting to order. Seems like it's 7 o'clock. I'm Matt Johnson. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Board. I wanted to note that this meeting is being recorded both by us and by our local television. And that if you also, in addition to this very extensive coverage, you're adding your own, you should tell us that you are doing so, just so that we can make arrangements not to have any interference with the proceedings. On tonight's agenda, the very first topic that we have is to discuss the implementation of our tree bylaw, which we passed a little while ago and developed rules and regs, and now we've had enough experience, I think, that we can kind of see, well, how's it going? So I will yield the floor to our town staff to discuss that.
Sure, thank you. So tonight you have with you our reviewing agent from Davey Tree, Liz McKinley, that's right. Our building commissioner, Ray Maddie, and our local inspector, Ed Mullen. So I think what I'll probably turn it over and let Ray and Ed give you, an overall view of, we've been, I would say, for a little over almost a year and a half now, or a little less than a year and a half, after the rules and regs got finalized, been working on the implementation side of the bylaw as far as taking in permits and trying to work our way, navigate through the issues and concerns, and working with the different builders and homeowners and figuring out how we work this. So I think they can give you an overview of that aspect, and then Liz can give you an overview of some of the issues and concerns just out in the field, working with the developers, coming back, working with staff, and that aspect. So,
Okay.
Ray?
So since the bylaw's been in effect, I believe we've only had 3 or 4 houses or CVOs that have been issued that tree bylaw was triggered. One of them.
Isn't that surprising? I mean, how many?
Well, it was last May.
May 2nd was the first time we issued.
Right.
So we have 1 full year.
Right.
Mhm.
So am I right? Because I don't issue all the permits, so
Right.
I think we're talking there's 3 or 4 of them.
Since the applications have come in, it's signified that they had tree protection or mitigation requirements.
Yeah.
Only 3 or 4 COs have gone out since then for certificates of occupancy. But as the process begins, the first thing they do, when somebody's applying for a building permit, is we have a sign-off sheet where they go to the tax collector, natural resources, planning division. When they go to planning division, they check off whether or not the tree preservation bylaw is triggered. And they simply answer yes or no, and if they answer yes, they have to provide us with an approved tree permit or an absence of protected tree affidavit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's step 1 in the process. Once we get through that, if they provide us with the protected tree and impact removal permit, so it's either they're going to protect the tree or they're going to remove it and provide mitigation. In our last check on them is when we issued the certificate of occupancy, we updated our certificate once this bylaw was passed, or actually a few months even later, when we realized we didn't have a look back for us. So now before a CO was issued, we take a look and see, was the tree preservation bylaw triggered? And if yes, has the reviewing agent done a final sign-off? Or is there a performance guarantee in place when we check that?
Yeah, I mean, because I think that our fee structure was intended to help pay for that look back, to cover the cost.
Well, I think what Ed's talking about is the certificate of occupancy. We added, was tree bylaw triggered, yes or no, so that the inspectors that is issuing the COO is aware that the tree bylaw was triggered, so it doesn't fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
So that's what that is about.
So the actual fee is, covers, I'm going to say, very, very limited amount of time staff, the time that actual town staff spends on it. It completely covers any time for our reviewing agent.
Right, that's what it was intended.
Review
yeah.
the plan and the application, go out, do an initial site visit, and then go out and do an additional site visit prior to the issuance of final occupancy.
Right, that's what I
So,
was referring
But
to.
it does not cover any town staff time in between.
Okay. But I think what we were trying to cover was the reviewing agent visits, both at
Right.
the beginning and the end of the
Yes.
process.
So it does cover those 2 visits.
Yeah. Okay. So only 3 of these, there've been quite a few tear downs and, other kinds of projects in town.
Right, but we're talking just closed out, completed.
Yeah.
Plenty of them have filled out tree
Okay.
impact
Okay, all right,
applications.
got
Yeah,
it. Okay, so,
there's been plenty of those.
all right. How many approximately?
We don't track them.
Like 40?
Probably just around, I would say
About 20?
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe
20.
For 18 and up to now, for a year. maybe
Right,
20.
and the reason that that's interesting is that, with just 3 completed, you don't get a lot of clarity as to, well, what is the impact of this? But with 20, you start to feel like you can see at least what they're planning to do
Well,
in each case.
I think with the 20, we can see only the first half of the process.
Yeah,
And, we'll continue to speak to some of the issues with the first half of the process. At this point in time, I don't think we have any real good knowledge basis on the last half of the process. It takes a long time for projects to get done in this community.
but the first half of
Right
the
out.
process is where the plan is gonna indicate what trees are to be taken and what
Right.
mitigations are to be installed. It doesn't indicate whether, for example, the tree protection measures are effective or, whether they were actually installed.
And I don't think the 3 that have been issued had significant replanting requirements,
Okay,
so we
Yeah.
can't speak to that at all.
The only, the only issue that I've run into so far is just making proper placement of plantings. For
uh-huh,
example, there was a contractor, he put in 10 Norway maples all within 50, or Norway spruces,
there,
all within 50 feet of each other.
yeah,
So that was 5 feet apart.
wow,
So as those age, they're gonna have to be removed. So
Yeah.
I think, we were thinking maybe Davey could help out with like a planting class or something, just an educational outreach component for contractors potentially.
Is there any language in our bylaw that talks about the placement of anything, or in the rules or regs?
No, there's no planting.
Because, because it's clearly a Norway spruce, it's a huge tree, would
Right.
mature. Okay,
So I think to that aspect, some of what we have seen is some of the applicants come in, they have the plan, we know, exactly what they're going to be removing, we know exactly what they're proposing to replant.
yeah,
And they said, okay, well, this is the approximate area, but, basically until we're done with constructing the house and doing our site improvements, putting it there may not work, we'd like to move it there. So, for some of the much larger projects, it's come down to, well, show the required mitigation on the plan, and then, when you get ready to plant, we'll have the reviewing agent go out there and walk with you on where, where the trees are gonna be planted. If you don't want it there, yes, we can move it. This case was, the required planting was shown on the plan, and then they just went in and planted them all too close. So, that's kind of a different problem. So I think, we've tried to strike this balance of having a bylaw and very rigid rules and regs with the reality of, until this 6,000 square foot house gets built and, the site work around the house is done, moving a tree 10 feet, that's a reality of construction. So I think we've done a good job trying to work within, those constraints, but there is this certain knowledge base that's also not out there.
Yeah.
You know, you have a great person, you know, developer filing the application that has done a really good job with, you know, hiring a good arborist or hiring somebody to do their plan. But then it's, you know, the contractor hires whichever landscape company and, you know, somebody's not on the job 24/7 and 10 Norway spruces can be planted in a very, very short period of time,
Yep.
so. So I think that's one, you know, one recommendation that you're hearing. It's not, you know, specifically related to the implementation of the tree bylaw, but, you know, as far as a planting class.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to the Board of Health does a couple of classes each year for restaurants, for their staff on, here's things you need to think about, you know, as far as meeting the requirements of the food code. So we kind of do the same thing, look for funding to have Davy Tree do that type of class as well, so that's.
Okay.
Go ahead, sorry.
That's okay. So this spring, when the weather got a little bit better, we did start to get several complaints about the lack of tree protection on several sites here in town, where the applicant had actually submitted that there was no tree protection or mitigation required. So their application went through. We have a plot plan that just shows the house being built and no trees on that plot plan. So we were going forward, and then we got complaints saying, hey, you know, I helped write that bylaw, I'm a concerned citizen, and we're noticing that trees aren't being protected and we think they're supposed to be. And we were calling the contractors back in, having them refile, you know, for tree protection plan and re-educate them on the process and, you know, hopefully getting them up to speed on what was required.
Mm-hmm.
So, 50-50 on the results on that so far, but as we move forward, we have a better understanding what we need to be looking for.
So these are cases in which the developer stated that the tree bylaw would not be triggered by their project. Because if it was, you'd be out there taking a look.
Right.
So, gosh, I wonder if that's one of the first issues, is just because they assert that it's not
Right, and
relevant.
you know, for the most part, these are developers that we have worked with in the past and have never really had any structural or building issues with. And trees, as a building inspector, I don't really know much about.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if it is an invasive species or it isn't, and what you know. So I'm waiting on an arborist or a land surveyor or Davy Tree to tell me there needs to be a fence here. It needs to be on the plan.
Yeah.
If I see it on the plan, I'll look for it on the site. Outside of that, if I see a snow fence around it, I'm just assuming the contractor wants to save the tree and is trying to keep it protected, but it's not part of the mitigation plan or the protected tree plan. So when I'm out in the field, I'm not looking at the trees. I'm there to do a building inspection and look at the house. You know, I expect that the reviewing agent has done it, or it doesn't need to be done.
Right.
So,
Well, I think in some cases too, some of the complaints were trees that were taken down were invasive species, or,
Right.
you know, and we don't know that either. So if somebody comes in, complains, you know, contractor just took down several trees, like I just said, I'm not gonna know if it was an invasive tree or not.
Right.
So that's kind of,
But you would, that's for sure, yeah. So, again, I mean, it almost sounds like we need the reviewing agent to engage whether or not the developer states that the project triggers the bylaw. I mean, I don't know, I mean, it's,
Right, so this was, you know, this was extensive discussion, you know, regarding that balance. So,
Yeah.
so where's, as far as where's the balance, and then do you, just make every applicant that comes in pay, you know, $100 to have the reviewing agent go out there, and so you might as well not have an affidavit and rely on and just inspect everything. It's so
it's
that's
tricky,
where
because when we came up with this affidavit process, it'd be like, if you were, you know, had a house that was on Commonwealth Ave, you know, that was right next to the business district, I mean, there weren't any trees on the lot at all. I mean, it
Well,
would
so
make
here's-
no sense to.
Here's the most recent example. We have a property owner that has an existing very old detached garage. And he's gonna demolish the detached garage and build a new detached garage, same spot, same size. There's 2 trees between the garage and the house that he wants to remove, they're not within the setbacks.
Right.
It's more than 250 square feet, so, the question comes down to, you know, he's not removing any trees in the setbacks.
Right.
The bylaw, you know, he meets the bylaw as far as what's required, it's over 250 square feet that he's demolishing. But he's not removing, you know, any trees in the setback, but he can't tell you whether any of those trees are, you know, protected trees or not that are in the setback. And he's not, you know, he's not willing to hire an arborist and a surveyor to go and tell him
Well, how about this?
which trees, because I'm just removing my existing garage, I'm building the same exact garage, I'm removing two trees between the house and the garage, and so that, you know, there was a lot of discussion, so at that point, it's,
But what's the penalty if someone asserts that the tree bylaw does not apply to their development project, and indeed it does?
They get re-educated.
So I think if there are non-compliance that we find out about, we have the authority to issue fines.
Okay.
and
But I mean, I guess,
you issue fines and they're required to pay the tree mitigation or replant.
right, but I'm just saying that, you know, if they don't file and then basically later on someone complains
Right.
and then you find that you need to file, you would issue a fine in that case?
Well, that's not the first step, but first step would be to have them apply for the tree.
Because I guess the issue of compliance, right, it's like, well, if there's enough of a penalty, perhaps you'd get more compliance. I don't know, if
Yeah.
compliance is an issue here.
So compliance is what we prefer as opposed to enforcement, and so
Yeah.
we obviously try to get them to comply. We, you know, if we find out and we go up to them and say, listen, we weren't aware, maybe you didn't understand the bylaw, but
Yeah.
we're making you aware now, please comply with the requirements, and they do.
Okay.
Unless the tree's already gone.
No, so we haven't had that issue yet where they've actually taken the tree down.
Okay.
We've just had it not be protected when they're supposed to be protected, so
Okay.
they've established the fences, you know,
Okay.
that's required.
So that was also a previous conversation, if, you know, they get out there and the tree's taken down, it's like, well, you know, as part of your compliance, you will be required to mitigate that tree.
Yeah, sure.
You choose how you wanna mitigate it. I can tell you right now, nobody has selected mitigating by paying $375 an inch.
Right, so that's the next question well, there are a few questions on my mind. One is, what is the administrative burden of the bylaw? What has been the effect of the bylaw, you know, in terms of tree preservation? And then, yeah, what has been the impact on the property owners in terms of payments or other work that they've done as a consequence? So those are the things that are most on my mind.
So a quick answer to some of those questions would be the consequences of the fee structure and or the survey, you know, all of it gets passed on to the homeowner, right? Whether it's a custom build or a spec build, that
Sure.
it drives the price of the house up. So that's the first consequence of this bylaw. That being said, you are protecting trees, so
Right.
what's the balance?
Right.
I know
Well,
that-
that's what the town voted to do.
Right,
Yeah.
so then the next question is, you know, what has it done to the building department for, as far as a burden for us to have to go through something that, as building inspectors, are not in our purview, we're not educated in it, we didn't study for it, we didn't take it, it's not a zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
It's a general bylaw, so there's a lot of things that we look at and say, how did this end up in our lap? You know, we understand it's important, we wanna help enforce it and implement it, but we're grateful that Davy Tree participates in it.
Yeah,
because
well, that was the
we're really
hope, was
lost
to have
without them,
someone
you
with
know?
the expertise take the burden off of you for that, yeah.
I just don't know how we can move it so that we can guarantee that it's being done correctly, whether there's more involvement from Davy Tree, or there's a stricter requirement on the builder or the homeowner to make sure that they're in compliance before they file for a building permit.
From a,
And then what about tree preservation? I mean, I don't know, maybe you could speak to, how many trees you think would have been cut down that aren't getting cut down?
Yeah, I think it's doing its job. The main issue that I've run into is just making sure that they have the proper fencing up when I get out there.
Uh-huh.
So we were allowing them to do snow fencing, and then we had an issue where a contractor actually moved the fencing and then pushed dirt onto the trees. So now we're starting to enforce that it all has to be the steel fence on like the green rods. So it's harder
Okay.
for them to remove.
Yeah,
And the only other issue too would be that they will sometimes ID, the arborist might not be a certified arborist and will ID trees incorrectly. So let's say they say it's a Norway maple and they are gonna remove it because it's invasive, and I get out there and I'm like, it's a sugar maple.
Right.
You need to change that on your plan.
they also should change careers. Yeah, okay.
So from a town's, a town staff perspective, it's, a lot of things, it's, you have to rely on people, and whether they're licensed or whether, they're a builder in town. And so, yes, they come in, so do you have a certified arborist who's, identified things and worked with your surveyor? Yes. It's like, great, they provide the list and everything. So, could town staff, and from a time perspective, for my division, and we deal with just taking in the application and answering the questions. It's been significant. Could it be, all consuming? Yes. Could we now start having, sorry, I have to go to, this, website and make sure that you're certified. Oh, look, your certification is expired. Please go, hire someone. I mean, it can be endless. From a tree saving part of it, yes, it has saved trees that in the setbacks that normally I think would have been cut down. It's caused, out of 20, I'm gonna say maybe 4 or 5 to alter their plan slightly. To, all right, then I'll move the driveway over here. For the most part of the 20, I'm gonna say at least 2/3 are developers.
Yeah.
And so they don't pay the mitigation fee. They do develop a plan, a replanting plan. They're all great. I have a couple of developers who I feel are they've worked with, very good arborists, very good landscape architects to develop plans. I think they're eventually will be great plans. Some of the others, it's, they're gonna plunk a
Right.
2-inch tree down, every, 15 feet. And I think the back end of this issue will be 2 things. We already have one developer who purchased a property, cut down every single tree, and will wait 12 months and a day until they get a permit.
Oh, I thought it was 18.
No,
It's
1
12.
year,
Okay.
one year, so we'll look back's 1 year.
Okay.
And he has no problem waiting 1 year. We also have no idea as far as the replanting side of things. And I know that, I don't know the outcome yet. I know Wellesley, which we modeled our bylaw after, I don't know if it passed yet, or even made it to the floor of town meeting. We're gonna amend their tree bylaw to remove the option of replanting.
Huh.
Because it doesn't work. 3 years down the road,
Lots of dead trees.
yeah, you have lots of dead trees, and after 12 months and a day, the tree dies and the new homeowner just removes it. And so that's to be seen. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say though, that we need to worry about that 12 month and a day issue, right? And so, what?
Can that be amended to be
Well,
substantially longer?
well, I don't even
you-
know. I mean, because
you can, but
the burden on the
yeah,
homeowner
that-
becomes higher because
well,
then
no, it's not. But it's a realistic expectation on who's going to enforce that.
true. Well, satellite photos help a little, but they only go so far. We're not getting a daily satellite coverage
But
of Concord.
but once again, getting
But-
back to town staff, I'm not an arborist. you know, I can't do that, it's not what I went to school for, that's not what a lot of people went to school for. So you're now talking about a period of time where a developer, you know, goes through and, you know, meets all the requirements, plants the trees, sells the property. Yeah, you can extend it, but then it really becomes this enforcement. I mean, we're lucky at this point because I think developers, they go through this process, they plant the trees, and it may be, you know, 6 months till they actually sell some of the, you know, the properties, and
Yeah.
so we're into it.
But I
So-
can't imagine that, considering the cost of capital, especially on a lot in Concord,
Sit on it.
that sitting on it doesn't make financial sense. I mean,
Yeah,
versus
they do.
cutting every tree. No, but it just doesn't. I mean, they probably are speculating on the land for other reasons. I mean, if that's happening, because it's just, there's not that much cost savings wrapped up in those trees around the periphery of the lot.
You're talking about homes where they're being bought for $1.6 million and completely being demolished. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
you know,
But then if
taking
you're still on that
down, you know,
$1.6 million investment for a year, that's costing you a lot of money.
but it's happening. It's,
Well, in a rising property value market, a speculative market, then they can do that if they're willing to bet.
but
But
you're
if it's
talking
not-
about a mitigation fee of, you know, maybe $10,000.
See, that shouldn't
Yeah.
So for them, you know, $10,000 is,
just wrapped up.
Well, and that's why I would think they wouldn't even worry about waiting 12 months. Why wait 12 months in a day in that case? Why not just, if your real motivation is to cut down all the trees, you
can't
just
speak
build
to
right
that.
away.
But,
I
but
can't
there's
speak to
only,
that.
is there only one instance of that, or are you saying
So
that
far.
repeatedly? Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that might be
A
an
point off the
outlier.
curve, yeah. Okay, so I guess I'm coming back to, all right, you're here tonight. What would you prefer that we do to help you out? Given that we have this law in the books, and we need to implement it.
Well, like you alluded to, the absence of tree sign off.
Yeah,
That kind of gives the contractor, I'm not gonna say carte blanche, but if he does take down trees, we have no plan. We don't know what's going on, but then we want to have them incur the cost of a plot plan and arborist, so
yeah.
I don't know, I think, would you agree, that's one of the
Yeah.
hardest areas?
So talking to some of the developers, they've said that it's the developers that have complied and have done the survey with the arborist, you know, or a landscape architect, it has increased their cost for the plot plan by $1,500 to $3,000. Again, just an increased cost in development.
Yeah,
So they're passing it on the sale of the property.
sure.
When
I
they
mean,
talk
but
about-
and it does cost something to do the right things, quote
Right, yeah,
unquote,
no,
right? And that's
100%.
what the bylaw does, is it sort of insists that you do the right thing. I mean, I guess, how we
Right.
define it, the right thing to
So-
mean.
In the time it takes the staff, our department, you know, when a complaint comes in, to research it, to reach out, to do the look back, to track, you know, to get a hold of Davy Tree or and have discussions with Elizabeth's department, you know, how do we wrangle that one back in and get them to get it right? You know, you're talking about hours of our time in a day,
Yeah,
you know, and pulling files for the complainant to review and answering questions or emails. You know, there is a provision in the bylaw where we could just actually say, contact Davy Tree, and if we could actually pass it off, that I don't think there's funding for them in that to go. I know if we read the bylaw the way we want to, we could just say, go to Davy Tree and make sure that they're in compliance, and then let us know how it turns out, you know?
So why can the town not have a list of potential arborists like Davy Tree, and as part of the process require that there be a fee that is paid to the town for the arborist to go and do a review of the site prior to any work being done, identify the trees so they're identified properly, so they're not hiring an arborist who may or may not intentionally misidentify a tree. And then you have, for that plot, you have a layout of what the trees currently are there. And then when you go back through, that same arborist or another one goes through and just aligns with what was done initially says, okay, these trees are still here that were identified.
The-
I think we
Yeah, so
considered
the
that.
issue with that is the state procurement
Yeah.
laws,
Got it.
and the fact that, the town cannot,
Have a list.
have a list and cannot recommend, you know, we
Preferred
hear it all the time, can you,
Yeah.
you know, do you have a list of surveyors? Nope. Do you have a list of engineers? No, I can tell you, you know, I can give you a list of all the surveyors that, you know, work in this town consistently, but I cannot recommend anybody. And that's the state procurement requirements.
Well, and secondarily, the idea that you'd have every applicant get a survey, we considered, you know what, we're asking what the warts are now. I think we balanced a lot of things in terms of the burden on the homeowner, the cost to the homeowners versus the stated desire to save trees. We've got 3 cases to go from it. I mean, I would think there would be a learning curve, and we should continue to think of maintaining that balance of the burden and you know, there will undoubtedly be trees that get cut down off a lot, and there will undoubtedly be trees that are poorly planted, but our mandate isn't to enforce good landscaping design in Concord. It's to try to have a balanced approach to save.
Well, so again, gets back to what is any concrete adjustments we should be making in rules and regs, or to a more, you know, extreme extent to bylaw itself that would require us to go to town meeting.
Well, honestly, so Ed handled most of the complaints that came in for the tree bylaw, and I was just rereading this morning, and where it says on section 6.4, suspension or revocation.
Yeah.
So when the complaints were coming in that trees were being taken down or fencing, I was unaware that the review agent can go out there first.
Yeah.
So when the complaint comes into our office, we weren't doing this this year. Say, okay, you received your complaint, we're going to notify the reviewing agent, get him out there, get them into compliance, or Liz.
Yeah.
Stop. So we weren't doing that this year.
Okay.
For whatever
maybe
reason.
so that's already in
Yeah.
there.
Right,
We
so
can
for whatever
start
reason, you know,
Yeah.
it's a new bylaw.
Yeah.
No, the process starts in planning, we issue the permits, then the complaints come to us. So this was
Yeah.
the first year, you know, and there's a lot here to read, and you
Yeah,
read it once,
sure.
you read it twice, and honestly, this morning's the first time I really picked up on this.
Okay,
So-
great.
So the you know, the issue with, you know, enforcement and complaints is, you know, once again, it comes down to, town staff and, you know, I think with the new, comprehensive long-range plan, some of these things we're, you know, looking at when you implement new bylaws, general or zoning or,
The cross.
is that financial cross path. So
Yeah.
when this got approved by town meeting, there probably should have been a corresponding budget line item for the, you know, the what if questions for the reviewing agent. Town staff has a question, you know, it's being able to, you know, contact the reviewing agent. You know, we don't have that line item in our budget for
Well,
my
and that may
budget.
be possible this year to add something. I mean, now that we
Yeah,
have the
so,
experience,
yeah,
we
you would be
know
talking-
kind of what the cost
Yeah, you
is.
would be talking July 1st, 2020 would be
Yeah, sure.
the first year. So, you know, can we, you know, with the
Muddle through
closeout,
for-
muddle through closeout of this year and find a couple $1,000s to encumber? Yes, probably. So,
Well, then we'd have more data about how much we would ask for based on
Yeah.
the first.
I mean, because the thing is, to get it into the budget, we don't have all that much time. You know, the end of the year basically is when things start to get pretty,
yeah,
Frozen.
you have about 2.5 months before you can start working with the FinCom on.
exactly.
when they
So,
start
I mean,
doing the
you know,
budget.
this isn't that out of whack as far as the time to start thinking about that.
What about community preservation funds?
I think community
No.
preservation funds are more episodic. They're not really, I mean, this is a standing item.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was just thinking for that first year, and then you would know how well it was used, and then.
Yeah, but I think it
Yeah, I
doesn't
don't
fit the
think- Yeah, I
profile.
don't think you could make that link between open space and private property.
Okay.
All right, well, any other points from staff?
I guess the big thing for me when I get out there is making sure that the contractors know that they should already have the tree fencing there.
Mhm.
Because then otherwise I have to come back, and I won't sign off.
Yeah,
So that's just an educational component usually. And things are starting to move smoother, but if it's a new contractor, sometimes they don't realize that that's.
well, and do we have something to educate the contractors when they submit this thing? I mean, there's just the,
Yeah, there's only so
Our
many
rules and
things you
regs.
can actually highlight on the
yeah,
application.
yeah.
This is what you need to do before the
Right.
reviewing agent gets out there, so, it has been a very steep learning curve, I'm gonna say. It's been one of, the more difficult and challenging bylaws to implement. I do think the idea about holding the class, and again, sadly, it comes down to, finding the funds to do it. If you have to make it free and you have to make it voluntary with,
Right.
Encouragement.
with encouragement. So again, sadly, it comes down to, for my planning division budget, it starts at zero.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think we can probably come up with something, but again, as far as the implementation side of it, I think for us, we're working through certain things. I think it's been, a year, and, some of the implementation issues as far as the application, we've been, the application in this past year we've changed it 6 times to try and address certain things during just the application, just filling out the application.
But could we have something like a reinspection fee? Like if they haven't installed the protections, right, and you've got to go back out, well, that is a cost for that.
Right,
Right.
so again, who is the enforcement agent on, you have to pay this reinspection fee? Does the building department then have to try and hold up the building permit, which there's even, question whether actual building permit can be held up. I think we've made the argument in certain cases where, I don't think somebody would take us to court if the building permit wasn't issued, but I've been surprised before. But it's saying, okay, so who is the one to follow through as far as town staff with making sure they pay the reinspection fee? And then, is it my admin staff, is it the building department admin staff who, currently.
Chases these invoices.
Well, and I can tell you, it won't be the building department staff. I mean, on a daily basis, the turnover they do is, probably, 150 checks a day. And so it's the realization, yes, I do think, there should be a reinspection fee.
I
And
think
then
you
it's
should have
working.
take Visa and MasterCard on site with your iPhone.
Well, from a year from now, we're gonna have online permitting, so.
Yeah.
And so the reinspection fee will be perfect, because you just won't get anywhere unless you pay it online, so.
Yeah, you don't get out of the pickup truck unless there's.
So I think, what I think town staff was hoping tonight is, there's currently I don't think any of us have this magic fix. But I think it's understanding that, we're kind of working through these issues, and, there's going to fix the issues, there's going to be a cost burden, whether it's
Yeah.
on town staff or whether it's on a developer or on the back end, the homeowner who buys the house.
Yeah.
That's the only way, a higher level of, I'm gonna say, compliance or, details that get worked out in the bylaw will happen.
Okay.
So,
Any
I
other?
think part of the problem is Davy Tree goes out there, before we issue a building permit, they check the fencing, make sure they're in compliance. We issue a building permit, we don't go back out there. I mean, so they get their excavators in to dig the take down the house, dig a cell hole, whatever. They remove the snow fence to get the equipment in.
Right, sure.
You know, somebody, town resident drives by, they're down in the donut department, you know, so we're unaware that this goes on all through the course of that construction of that house. Fence is removed,
Yeah,
for whatever reason, the fence is down. We're not aware of that. We're not going to that house every day checking on the fencing. So that's been, I think, part of the biggest problem is enforcement on all the complaints we've been getting.
Well, and hopefully that will be fixed too, because now we're not
Right,
allowing them to do
right.
snow fencing anymore, so it's not as easily removed.
yeah.
I think that was our biggest problem this year.
Okay, yeah, the snow fencing. Any other comments from the board? Okay. I think, you know, given the topic that I'll just open it up briefly for public comment. The focus of the discussion tonight has really been on the implementation of the tree preservation bylaw. So I'd really like to encourage comments to be focused on that issue. And so I see that here.
Yeah, I'm
Please
Pete
identify
Funkhauser.
yourself and your
Pete Funkhauser, 266 Main Street. I was on the committee that developed the bylaw.
Okay.
I'm fascinated that there's only been 3 or 4 cases of
Yeah.
taken to completion,
Yeah.
and there's many more to come. I'd like to thank you for doing this meeting and recommend that you repeat it a year from now when we have more data
I
about
agree,
what's
by
been
the
going
way.
on. It's
I
been
think
very
that-
helpful, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't feel comfortable making a recommendation on the basis of the little bit of experience that we have so far.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tanya Davis, 62 Prescott Road. We have observed in our neighborhood that it is making a difference. We have seen some trees preserved that might not have been preserved otherwise, so thank you. On the flip side, there was one construction where some trees that would be protected were damaged, and this was in April of 2018, April 3rd and 4th, and we noticed that they had signed, this was after the rules and regulations were in place, but apparently there were no forms given out. So the permit was issued April 3rd, and then the forms started being given out on April 4th. So it sort of was surprising that just because the forms aren't there, they didn't abide by the bylaw. I will repeat something I said before about the fact that the invasives shouldn't matter for the purposes of this bylaw, that they should be also protected because this is not ecological, well, I mean, it is, but they should also be replaced if cut down. And that might simplify the tree identification issue as well. Budget-wise, maybe other corners could be cut. Sometimes I say this very humbly, only because it just came up again. Like the long-range plan consultant last year demanded more than their budget, and then they were given that. And instead of that, maybe some of it could have been preserved for these kinds of projects for which the funding is tight. Lastly, Mark and I have read and reread the bylaw, and it looks to us like it should apply to PRDs as well. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, Mark Galis, 62 Prescott Road. Thank you very much for this attention and caring this. I think it's very important for reducing the impact of the development on neighborhoods and abutters. There are people who have been very concerned about large numbers of mature trees going to be removed right next to their lot lines, etc. So I think this is important, and as Tanya said, it has made some impact. With regard to the education for more effective protection, one thing certainly could be to add into the rules and regs some examples of the kind of fencing that is effective protection or whatever, and also that prior to certain inspection steps that needs to be in place. it seems like that would be an easy thing for the
Yeah,
planning
and-
board to do.
In fact, I'm not recalling what the rules and regs say today. Do they require the metal fencing?
Mhm.
Yes, so I think that they do. I think that perhaps it was just not originally.
Yeah.
But maybe, you know, maybe pictures, diagrams, I don't know, or
Yeah.
something more prominent.
The only
et
gray
cetera.
area, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
The only gray area there is with Norway maples, if they're preserving them, tree protection fence doesn't really have to apply to them, they can get away with the snow fencing.
I see.
But I don't know if that's something
Okay.
you wanna.
But I don't, anyway, I have to double check again, but I don't think it prominently calls out that any old fence won't do, that it has to be something anchored.
Okay.
Okay, and also, I mean, with respect, again, to planned residential developments, you're talking about, just like in the bylaw, significant development on a single lot with, you know, in a residential area. Same kind of concerns for abutters to PRD are the case in individual ones, and I had asked town council whether he'd be able to weigh in on this, and he said that that would be fine if somebody in the town government requested it.
Right, and I mean, I have to say that in my reading of the tree preservation bylaw, I don't see anything that says that it doesn't apply to PRDs. And I'm just curious if, I don't know if other members of the board have a view, but that, I mean, it is, to my mind, you know, PRDs, since they're one large lot, the impact on the developer is actually much less than for an individual housing, you know, lot. Because it's just the perimeter of this large lot as opposed to the 1 acre or quarter acre lots. So
But
I don't know if
I
anybody else
agree
has
with your
looked at it.
assessment of the bylaw, and I remember the discussion was
Yeah.
definitely that as part of a PRD, we are also looking at a landscape plan, and so
Yes.
that could go through a separate process, so perhaps clarification could come to the bylaw that, I mean, determine one way or the other.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, right now, I think that it isn't, it doesn't, first of all, it says in the residential districts, to the extent that one of these projects is in a residential district and it's not a subdivision, it seems like there's no specific language that's excluding it.
So
So,
it's not specifically excluded or included.
no,
But
we
if
don't
it's not excluded, then it should automatically be,
include it. Right,
if it meets the, when does it apply?
right, exactly. So, anyway, I don't know what that, you know, the bearing on our in-flight PRD proposals and all of that, but something to consider.
So as far as the bearing, most of the PRD proposals that come in, the level of review is to a point where they've already surveyed the trees, and it would just be doing the calculation.
Right,
I-
it wouldn't be
I
that
don't-
big a burden on them.
Well,
And typically with their
It depends on who you
landscape-
ask.
Yeah,
but,
I'm sure.
No,
I'm sure.
they would go through and they would just do, you know, the calculation. The two that are currently going through, I don't have any concern that they wouldn't be able to meet the mitigation requirement based on the
The
proposed.
replantings that they're proposing.
Based on the replanting.
Right.
And again, we're only talking about the setback areas,
Right,
which for, you know, a PRD, it's.
a small proportion of the lot, so.
It's
No,
20, it's not the same as, you know, it's not 40 feet as if they were in Residence A, it's, you know, it's only 20, and,
You're right.
so, the impact for a PRD for tree removal in the setbacks is less than just a single family dwelling lot,
Right.
so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, since you've already spoken,
Yeah.
I'll let you speak in the front row.
Stefan Bader, 7 River Street. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the discussion, but in terms of outreach, educational outreach, I would suggest that the real estate brokers, agents would be a good target as well, not just the builders and developers. because I've seen instances where somebody buys a house and the closing goes through the registry of deeds, and a week later trees start coming down, and then you wait 6 months until any plans show up. That was the first thing they did, so somebody must have suggested to them that you can cut down trees if you want before you start everything else, and I think that may or may not be the case, but I think real estate brokers would be good people to know what the rules are and advise their clients. If you're buying this house, this lot with these trees, and that's the way it comes, you know, subject to all sorts of restrictions that you may have never thought about before you call a tree company.
Yeah, so town staff works with real estate agents, you know, on a daily basis, and when the bylaw actually went through and even after the rules and regs were established, you know, we notified as many people as, you know, we could, and on a yearly basis, I go to different real estate offices and you know, sit with them for an hour and a half and go through everything that's happening as far as what's coming down the pike. So, you know, again, it comes down to, you know, we educate and try and educate. And sadly, it comes down to a listening.
Okay, I've just got one more here and then one over there. Yeah, go ahead.
Jonathan Smith, Upland Road. My wife and I have been walking around our neighborhood, and when we drive around our neighborhood, we are familiar with a few projects that have been going on, and we have actually filed a few complaints. And in researching the files, we see that 5 out of 5 there have been false affidavits filed. So there's a data point for you. You don't have to wait a year for that one. And I understand, you know, builders want to minimize costs and maximize profits, just like any business person. I don't mean to vilify them, but there's, you know, what happens when they do that? And I'm glad that there was some sort of discussion to try to prevent this from happening by getting a certified arborist or landscape architect in there to identify the proper trees and to earmark which ones can or cannot be cut down and which ones need to be protected. As far as protection is concerned, some of these properties are built and have a for sale sign, and they have never had a fence around the trees. And we've even taken some pictures where bobcats are sitting right next to the tree. If I was the tree, this would be the bobcat. We're right next to there. And we've also seen some fencing around trees, which is great, but it's been the snow fencing, and so I'm glad to hear that the metal fencing will be going in. But again, if I were the tree, the fence would be right next to me, and that's what we've seen. They're not really following the bylaw. I'm not a builder, and you know, I'm not an esteemed member of the board. I don't understand all the ins and outs, but I read through the bylaw and I can kind of understand it. It doesn't take a genius to figure out where to put the fencing, and we have yet to find a project where the fencing was done appropriately for the entire duration of the project. So it's kind of upsetting that seeing that we have this bylaw and that it doesn't seem like anybody's really following the rules and nothing happens.
Well, I think we need to get enforcement to happen. It also seems like we need the trust but verify process around the affidavits. Actually, let me go to Tanya. And then,
Yeah, my point is brief. I respect what Elizabeth just said about the PRDs that are under consideration at this time. Nevertheless, it is for its own sake important to clarify once and for all whether the bylaw as it stands now applies or doesn't apply to PRDs, just for clarity for the whole town and everything. Thank you.
okay. And then back here.
Right, so quickly,
Your name
I'd say,
and
Karen Jordan, Upland Road. So I would applaud the people who
I'm sorry, your address?
Upland Road.
Your address?
Number.
66, thank you.
Applaud the people that wrote the bylaw. I think it's very well written. I think the town has done a great job of creating supporting documentation that put in very explicit language, the rules and regulations, the frequently asked questions. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand. The town's done a great job of making it easy to understand. But there are issues with the bylaw, the first one being that the property owner, the builder, can submit this affidavit of the absence of protected trees. And when they do that, they sign something saying they've read the bylaw, they understand it, and they are complying. But I can tell you 5 where it was very explicit that there are trees that needed to be protected. They didn't, they submitted the affidavit, and then nothing happened afterwards. So we have a problem with the initial step, and I would imagine that a fine would make sure that they all get in line, because these are builders that are doing it. If they can get away with it once, they'll do it a second time, a third time. That message will get around, but there is no fine for submitting a false affidavit.
Well, I think there's a fine for not obeying the bylaw, though. Right.
Tell me one of these people that have been fined.
That's right. Nobody that I've heard of.
So when we issue fines, it's usually you have 30 days to comply.
Yeah.
We don't just, as long as I've been here, honestly,
Right.
I don't remember collecting any fees. Like Ed said, it's supposed to be compliance. You send out the fine, the enforcement, 30 days, and in most cases, that person has complied. I mean, it's not specifically the tree bylaw, but other zoning enforcement.
Right. Okay, I want to actually halt at this point. I think that we've given it about an hour, and I think it was a very good discussion. I think that one action out of the discussion tonight is that we will reconvene on this topic in approximately 1 year with the idea of having more experience and the ability to refine. I hope also in the meantime, some of these issues, even if more informally, are dealt with from a process perspective. Again, the trust but verify aspect, maybe enforcement of some sort, in terms of warnings and whatever, to try to get better compliance. Because it sounds like the bylaw is doing what it intended to do when it's followed. So, okay, thanks very much for those that attended for this purpose. If you are exiting the meeting, please go all the way outside the building if you're having discussions so that the meeting can disrupted. We can't close the door. Okay, so, yes. Yes.
Maybe officers.
Okay, yeah, so question about that. Well, we have a quorum.
Yeah, I know.
So I think we're relaxed about the quorum.
Okay.
No,
Who wants to be
need,
present for the election?
you need 4 to hold a meeting.
Right.
You need 5 for like a special permit or a definitive subdivision.
Right, but for electing officers,
You need 4.
4. So we're relaxed. Okay? So, now I'd like to turn our attention to the 7:30.
So you can take whatever you want
You
out
can
of
take
order.
out order, but I don't see.
Burton's got to leave in 15 minutes.
All right. Okay. Let's do our officers. All right. So, we are in a new fiscal year, a new town year, and so we need to elect officers. I guess we need a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk. So, do we have some nominations?
I'd nominate you for the chair since you just took over, right?
I'm vice chair. I've been vice chair, but yes, I could be chair.
Isn't that the?
Second.
Yes.
We need further discussion on that one.
Move.
And then for the vice chair, there seems to be a natural progression I've noticed, which would be Alan,
The second most senior member.
second most senior member.
No,
just going by-
typically, historically, the clerk moves from clerk to vice chair.
Oh, really? You
Yeah.
didn't tell me that when I was clerk. That was not made clear to me when I volunteered to do that job.
I like that. Yeah.
So the clerk position is relatively subdued. So
Yeah.
they didn't mention that.
And then, so for clerk, do we have any proposals for
So
clerk?
Kate doesn't know what the clerk is. It's
I also am not accepting any, no.
well, no, I'm just.
You come out very fast.
So there's obvious, the chair, the vice chair will run the meeting in the absence of the chair. Should the chair and the vice chair be absent, then it actually does fall to the clerk, although that has never happened, since.
Because then you're right on the bare edge of a quorum.
So the clerk's current job for some committees that don't have professional staff support, the clerk is actually the one that takes the minutes and types and drafts up the minutes. Not the case here. So it is the clerk's responsibility when the minutes are drafted. The board reviews the minutes. The clerk is actually the one, after they are accepted by the board, who signs the minutes that get submitted to the town clerk.
Right, presumably taking into account that the changes were.
Yeah, just
implemented.
verifying changes if there are any to drafted
So
minutes.
it's a pretty low key.
Burton, do you want to be vice chair?
Vice Chair, no.
Oh.
I'll do that.
Okay.
It's okay?
Second.
When does your
Did
commission
Kristen, you just
end?
nominated Burton for clerk?
Yes.
And I think Nathan just said.
Oh, great,
Yes,
great,
I
then,
second.
yeah, all right. Okay, so we have 3 positions, 3 nominations.
Wait, hold on, Kristen, do you accept the nomination to be vice chair? I don't.
It seemed like everybody else said no, unless Nathan, you want to do it.
Wait, what?
Vice chair.
No, it's for you.
I would love to do it.
All right.
Let's vote on that, because we didn't, right?
Well, we haven't voted on
yet.
any.
Just the nominations, we were
So I
just.
think we could just
Chair,
take
vice
one
chair.
vote on our 3 nominations.
Yes.
So,
Well, so Burton moved that Matt Johnson be chair, Kristen seconded. Burton moved that Kristen be vice chair,
It's
Alan
actually
seconded.
Alan, I think.
Alan seconded
Us.
that one, and then Kristen moved that Burton be clerk and Nathan seconded.
okay. So, all in favor of the first of these? Okay? All in favor of the second of these positions? All right, all in favor of the third? Okay, I think that we have a consensus.
Burton, did you want to do that
We
while you
now
were
have
here
new
so we didn't
officers.
nominate you in your absence?
No, it was the only thing that we had to vote on. was-
Because
That
we would've-
that might have
we
been a
would've.
good way to handle it.
All right. Okay, so now we're moving to our 7:30 item, the recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals for Charles Audie for a special permit and site plan review under 712, 11.6, and 11.8 of the zoning bylaw to extend a non-conforming use and to allow for the construction of a 1,056 square foot canopy over the existing gas pumps and a 10 square foot cashier's box at 185 Fitchburg Turnpike. Actually, is the cashier's box still part of the proposal?
It is no longer part
That's
of the
what I
proposal.
thought. I thought it was pulled out of there. Okay. All right. Please introduce yourselves and speak on behalf of the applicant.
So I'm Dan Gannon from Samson McNary. This
Okay.
is the applicant from Audi.
Okay.
So once we get this up, so there on the site there's currently an existing dwelling. It's a gas station. It's a building with some service bays on the side, 2 on either side, I believe. And in the front, in the parking lot, there are 4 gas pumps with 2, stations with 2 sides to park on either side to fuel the car. Here it comes. So, for reference, Sudbury Road's over here along this side, Fitchburg Turnpike's on this side. I don't know if you guys know the area, but there's a Dunkin' Donuts up here, Mahoney Gardens. Paul Mahoney stuck in my head. Mahoney Gardens up here. So that gives you an idea of where we are. So the existing building is here with a couple service bays on this side and a couple service bays on this side. We're located in residence AA, which this gas station in today's world would never be built here, but since it's there, hard to file a special permit. And here are the two gas pumps, so a car would be here, 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 and here if they were fueling. And just pavement runs approximately on here. And wetland located on the south side of the site. Yeah, so I guess the proposed project is a canopy with lighting underneath the canopy. It's 24 by 44 feet.
Do you want the architectural plan?
Yes,
Let me know.
that'd be great, yeah. With, I believe, 8 lights, 2 rows of 4, spaced evenly under the canopy. They're gonna be mounted in flush to the bottom of the canopy, so there will be nothing hanging to the extent of my knowledge. I'm not a lighting expert. I've been trying to learn as we go along here. But in this process, we learned from comments back from the health division that septic system's 7 feet from the wetlands. So there's a Title V inspection done. The system failed, so we have a redesign of the system as well. I'll stick with the lighting for now. So this blue area here is the canopy. The maximum foot candle under the canopy is 20, I believe, we got it down to. I don't believe any lighting extends off the property. Are there any questions on the lighting part of it at least?
Not now.
No. So the septic system is located, or the proposed septic system is located approximately in this area. Yeah, you can see it outlined around here. It's the only space we tested up here and back here. This was the only space we could really put the system because we were given permission by the water department, by Valerie Durer specifically, that we could connect to town water, which runs, it stops right about here, but we'll connect in this area. So we have a water line also running down the edge of the property line and then tying in out there. There's going to be minor replacement of pavement up in this area and some grading to meet requirements by Title V for the septic system.
Fairly flat site, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
It's a fairly flat site right now.
It's extremely flat.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I was just curious about the grading.
Right, it's raising it up about a foot in this area, and then we tried to make it as gentle as we could coming back down onto the site with the grades.
Okay, so it's just gonna be like a little
A
bump.
little bump coming in this entrance here. There's another entrance over on this side which won't be affected at all. And then we're proposing a vertical curb right starting from here along to here to catch up with the grade. So the grass will come up, hit the curb, come down, and then nicely come back onto the pavement where the parking lot is. Septic tank and the pump chamber are located down here, or will be located down here. They're proposed there. The existing septic system is this dashed line here, which you can see how close that is to the wetlands. Nobody was very pleased about that, including us and I'm sure Charlie, seeing that the septic was so close to the wetlands. Groundwater, when we did test bits for the septic down here, was at 2 feet below grade and 3 feet below grade up here. I think it was a pretty obvious choice to put the system up there. Siltation barriers run pretty much along the entire south side of the property to protect the wetlands. I think that covers it. No, that was probably in your fault.
What about the landscaping?
There's no trees or any landscaping. We can't really do anything once this gets loam seeded. Can't really plant anything on top of a septic system.
Right. And right now, Kristen's just got it up. It's just lawn.
It's just it's a small island in between Fitchburg Turnpike and the parking lot here.
Yeah.
It's very small.
Okay. Any discussion or questions from the board? Yeah.
What's the purpose of the canopy?
Because in the winter, it's very difficult to hire people working. Rain, snow, business goes probably 30% down, 40% when it's raining. And we've been having turnover employee every month or two. People, nobody wanna get sick.
Okay.
And I'm trying to pay at the pump so the employee doesn't have to run back and forth, so he can stay under the canopy.
It's currently full service.
Okay. Yeah, it's a throwback gas station right now, yeah. Any other questions, comments from the board? Okay. Any comments from the public? Well, then, I think that we could perhaps make a recommendation to the ZBA. This is a recommendation.
I don't think we've gotten
I thought you
Elizabeth's
did your report yet.
Report. Oh, we got to get. Well, we could give a indication of, do we see the need, any other changes, or are we good with her writing up a report that we can?
So the project is on the agenda for Thursday night for, correct?
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
the
Thursday
zoning,
for ZBA.
for the zoning board of appeals. The revised plans, and the revised, came in, on Friday. They have not been reviewed by town
Town
staff.
staff, that's right. We don't even have town staff's
I
read.
don't,
Yeah. Right.
I do not think there's gonna be any issues or concerns or showstoppers with the plans. I think, there will be a few standard conditions.
Sure.
Regarding the timing of different things and when they happen. And, so I think that the planning board can, provide, a positive recommendation, conditioned upon town staff providing the Board of Appeals their recommended, conditions.
I'm happy to do that, but then I have some questions.
So some of the things I can see, there will be certain conditions regarding, the timing for the installation of the septic system. And there may be, conditions regarding I'm gonna say decommission, I'm sure that's not the right word, for the existing on-site septic system. There'll be conditions from water sewer regarding tying in, and meeting the requirements for tying into town water. There'll be certain standard conditions, regarding, the canopy exterior. The first plan that came in, it had different colors and lighting around the exterior of the canopy. The revised plans, it's a white facade, and no exterior lighting, so that will likely be a recommended condition on mine, that there be no exterior lighting on the canopy. But from a condition standpoint, they're not changing. This drainage right here is actually being directed towards the site this way, so there's no increase in runoff this way, there's no change in this driveway. So engineering won't have any comments as far as the driveways. So very, very limited, but I just can't tell you what.
Sure, I mean, it sounds like we should just follow the standard process here, and you'll have a report, and we'll look at the report. Right.
So that would be, the applicant would go to the Board of Appeals meeting on Thursday night, give their presentation. The
Right.
Board of Appeals will continue it to.
Which they will
to the
do
next
regardless,
week.
I think.
If your report's not right.
If they don't have an actual written recommendation from the planning board. Yes, more than they would.
Right, I don't think they will, regardless of what we say tonight.
Well, you can make your recommendation and you can make your vote, and I'll write that up to the board. And then, that recommendation, my recommendation to you would be, yes, you could vote to recommend approval of the project.
Subject
to condition upon, town staff providing, conditions of approval.
Right. Okay.
My questions you actually addressed, which was on the canopy. Is it, I see there's existing lights on the property. Is that about the height of the canopy? Where the light
Poles are.
Yeah,
No, it's
the
higher.
canopy, it's a standard, so if a delivery truck driving through, so he doesn't have to touch it. I
Okay.
believe it's 14 or 16 feet.
14.6?
14.6, yes,
Okay.
that's a standard.
So probably slightly below the roof line of the
Yes.
gas station. And you've got what it looks like 4 lights out in front of the pumps today, and this would be replacing it with about an equivalent amount of light.
The lights and right near the pumps, those, they're gonna be removed.
Right.
Yes.
But this, what I'm saying is this is it's essentially an equivalent amount of lighting.
Yes.
Right on site.
Yes.
And then Elizabeth, and then in terms of branding, is there anything going on the canopy, or is it just
No.
white? Okay.
Plain.
And that would be the one thing I would want to make sure was in the conditions, was that it, like you said, no exterior lighting on that.
It's a plain of white, the siding, and the lights underneath.
So, and with that, I don't sniff anything
Well, the color of
particularly
the light
significant,
bulb
as long
is,
as there's
most
the
important
conditions
thing.
are.
What was that?
I said, I'm not seeing anything particularly significant, you didn't hear anything from the public raising concerns. I would be in support to move the process along to vote in favor, subject to the issuance of the planning documents report with the conditions that Elizabeth said.
Is said, yeah.
Yeah.
Any second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, Nathan seconds. Any
Question
discussion?
answered first?
Okay.
You sure?
They're all white lights.
Any deliberation on this vote?
Okay.
Yes. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Alan.
Al?
No,
Ask about the
I
color.
had a very specific question. The color of the light makes the biggest difference in these cases, like the temperature of the light. So if it goes towards warm temperatures versus colder colors.
Like a white
So-
LED versus a sodium vapor
No,
or orange
so-
light.
Towards blues or towards yellows. I think
So I believe it is all a white LED.
Yeah, so in the white LED, I think that this is going to affect at the end, like how it looks blue or it looks more warm.
I
So
think it
it's,
said the temperature down at the bottom.
with LEDs, it's a big issue, I think, but I just wanted to look at the color of the light.
Okay, so I can tell
Color
you.
options.
Uh,
How the temperature is.
Okay, so here's the fixture. And those are the
Bug reading that you sent us about.
specs on the fixture. So WH, I think, is the color.
Probably 5,700.
5,000.
Yeah, 57, yeah.
That's pretty.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's
So,
that's going
and
to
here's
make
the spec sheet.
I mean, if it makes it look more rural or much more like a highway type. I think.
So I think that's probably pretty standard. So I know for cars,
No, look,
The-
no,
the
but here it's saying
manufacturing
4,000
standard is
K color
55
temperature.
to 5,800.
So they're saying 4K.
That's an option.
So, no,
That's
so
one of the color.
Oh, okay.
this
That-
is
it's
the
right there,
actual
the white.
spec, right here. This is the
Yep, so
so it's this right.
WH, if you go
Yeah.
back to the other one, does it associate
Yep.
Kelvin rating with that? So with the, it just says white, it doesn't say.
Right there for the color temperature.
But that's an option.
What, so, yeah, it just says color option is white.
And then it does say 4,000 to
4,000. It's on
to
the
4,400.
So you want to go back to this? So that's the fixture.
Okay.
Were you
4,000 is pretty warm looking. That's like a standard incandescent.
compared to 5,700?
More close to 3,000, but.
Right. 3,000, well, 3,000 is more like in your home.
Home, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we want home, I mean, I don't think that's typical for a gas station. I mean, 57K is more like a daylight white.
So what I was saying earlier is that most of the auto manufacturers, their standard is between 5,500 and 5,800.
Right,
Because
so right
that's
here.
their range for pure daylight.
Right.
So if that is indeed 5,700, then
I think it's a daylight.
then that's probably pretty accurate for what,
Yep.
what I've seen at most newer gas stations.
That's right. Yes.
Actually, it's the same lights that I have at the mobile station,
Oh,
at Concord MA,
okay.
right near Starbucks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same lights, same manufacturer.
Okay. Well, I think that, and we haven't gotten neighborhood complaints about those lights.
Well,
Do you-
the,
do you-
the mobile station at the corner of Sudbury and Thoreau is a much different setting.
Sure, but it's one that's pretty close to a historic district, and I mean, where there'd be some
So-
sensitivity about the lighting.
Right. So, so when you talk about some of the conditions, it's, at the close of business, all lighting except for those for safety and security shall,
Yeah.
be turned off, and, so I think that's, the best way that you can try and address it
Right.
for
No,
this
but getting back
location.
to Alan's question about the temperature of the lights, I think that it seems okay. I don't know. It may be whiter
Yeah.
than, yeah.
I think the other thing to take into consideration is that, at least with that mobile station, because of the way they're sort of recessed, I mean, the light is pretty specific
Directed.
to the property. It's not like,
Well, and that's what you
blasting
get with
out
this,
everywhere.
this plan. You see
Right.
that it's actually pretty defined to the canopy itself, yes. Okay, so are we ready for a vote? All in favor? Okay, so we're making our recommendation, subject to those conditions. Okay,
Subject to the conditions that Elizabeth just mentioned, or to those she deems appropriate as she develops the report. I'm sorry.
Well, so town, all the other town departments will be provided their revised plans to
Yeah.
provide their comments for recommended conditions.
right. And I think that that's what Burton had put into
Yeah.
the motion before he left. Okay, then, I think we're ready to switch to administrative business. And so, I don't know, do people want to do A&Rs or do you want to do the housing choice? Okay, okay, Nathan would like to do A&Rs, let's do a couple A&Rs. Although one may take a little longer than usual.
I don't think so.
No? Okay, good, good. All right.
So the first one on your agenda is,
Would an approval not required what we're looking at?
Do you know about these?
I know what an approval not required is.
Good.
so the first one, 2160 Main Street.
Usually here if we can't see. Actually,
So the property is all the way out West Concord. About right here is the ice rink, Forest Ridge Road, driveway to Nuclear Meadows. I think this is the little insurance building down here. There's the driveway comes up. This is a steep slope that comes up this way. Assabet River is back here. And there's an existing driveway that comes up to here for the house. And they are looking to create one additional house lot. I asked when they contacted me about filing the A&R plan, the actual first A&R plan, they were going to propose 2 additional house lots. Given the slope of the properties, and they did provide a conceptual driveway plan, and we determined that that conceptual driveway plan was not feasible. I'll go into, I can explain why it wasn't feasible, but so they redesigned the project and came back with only 1 additional house lot. So with the A&R, the requirement under subdivision control law for approval not required. The lots have to have the required area and frontage under zoning on an adequate public way that provides safe vehicular and pedestrian access to the buildable portion of the lot. So they've provided this conceptual driveway plan. It shows a series of retaining walls under 4 feet in height, and then a driveway that has approximately 8% slope that comes down. Engineering division did review the plan as far as not for approval, not required, because that's not their purview, but for the ability to issue a driveway approach permit. And the town engineer's comment was there's no issue with site distance. They would need to provide additional details and likely mitigation to address drainage and runoff concerns, but that from a constructability aspect, while it would be very impactful, it is feasible.
They need a runaway truck ramp. But that's all right. This is not going to get built, but it needs to be able to be something that could be built.
So it's my understanding the end intention is that they will, should they move to the next step, if the plan is endorsed, they would move to the next step of going through the Natural Resources Commission for a notice of intent, because this is the 200 riverfront line so that's, so they would go through that aspect, but then also simultaneously come before the board for a special permit for a common driveway. And they would just seek to extend this current driveway over to here.
Okay, so they just have to show it's feasible.
Correct. For the planning board to review a special permit for a common driveway, the applicant actually has to have the ability to gain access to the buildable portion of the lot through their legal frontage.
Okay.
So they actually did file a special permit for a common driveway for the 3-lot, and they were requested to withdraw that special permit because the planning board's not able to issue a special permit for a common driveway for lots that don't exist. So this is why this is now coming through. They have to actually legally have buildable lots, and then if they come back before the board for a special permit for a common driveway, it gets into, is the common driveway a more acceptable development pattern than building their proposed driveway.
Seems like it's pretty clear. Okay.
So from a approval not required standpoint, each of the lots have the required at least 125 feet of frontage in the Residence B zone district, and over 20,000 square feet of buildable lot area. While significant portions are in the riverfront, the zoning bylaw only requires 50% of the area of the lot to be upland, which is outside of the floodplain conservancy district and the wetlands conservancy district. It does not incorporate the riverfront area.
Right. And we don't specify how much of the land has to be at less than a 25% grade.
Yes.
Right, okay. So
Currently the zoning bylaw does not have any specifications or requirements as far as slopes or retaining walls or driveways.
yeah. Okay. Anybody want to make a proposal on this?
Motion.
A motion?
I make a motion that the planning board should move to endorse the plan for MA's Development Company at 2160 Main Street, parcel 2326-1, by Stampede and McNary Incorporated dated May 20, 2019, as approval not required because the division of the tract of land shown on the plan is not a subdivision, because every lot shown on the plan has the required area and frontage on an adequate public way as required by the Concord zoning bylaw, and authorize the chair, clerk, or town planner to endorse the plan.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor? All right, that one's taken care of. So we can talk about Concord Academy.
This one is super easy. Concord Academy acquired the 2 residential house lots adjacent to them. No, 238 and 242. And what this plan will do will just delete the interior property lines, defining the 2 lots and combining them with the whole residential campus.
Okay.
So 2 purposes. One, when the Concord Academy went through and got a site plan approval to do the addition between the Haynes Hobson house, part of every project Concord Academy does, one of the factors that gets reviewed is their compliance with the parking requirements. So with the addition that was done between Haynes and Hobson House, they did increase the faculty residence by 1, which required increased parking. And they are proposing, there's existing parking over here for this residence and some spaces over here, which they are now including into their parking calculations, since staff members, one of the employees for Concord Academy will actually be living in this house, so they're able to relocate. As part of the approval for the site plan for the Haynes Hobson House addition, they are, 1, required to remove the property line so that it is one campus, but 2, from campus planning perspective, having it all one campus is preferable to them.
All right.
I move to endorse the plan for Concord Academy at 166, 238, and 242 Main Street, parcels 1706, 1710-1, 1710-2, dated June 6, 2019, as approval not required because the plan is not a subdivision, because it does not show a division of land, and authorize the chair, clerk, or town planner to endorse the plan.
Second that.
All those in favor? Okay, those are done. So that leaves us with the last content item for the night, which is the housing initiatives discussion. So, I mean, this is a series of ongoing topics. And I don't know if, Elizabeth, you wanted to introduce, but you know, what I've been working on and Elizabeth has been working on has been trying to collect together all of the kinds of questions, the action items for research, the sort of to-dos that we're going to need to be in a position to bring some of these initiatives forward to town meeting. And what I was hoping for tonight was to focus in on just one of those initiatives, the accessory dwelling units initiative. And actually, Elizabeth had made an initial set of questions that would help in the drafting of the bylaw language for any change to the bylaw around accessory dwellings. And so I think that we've all kind of already agreed that the 2-year waiting period is one of the things that we would be cutting out of this. But then that just still raises all of these other questions. And so what I'd like to do is in turn just look at each of these 10 things, and just to the extent that there's some debate or questions or discussion, to have that on this, just kind of give Elizabeth guidance in the drafting. So does that sound all right, folks? Okay, so I don't know how many of you, actually looked at recently the residential uses under section 422, the two-family or additional dwelling. But what it says today essentially is, you have to wait 2 years if you make any kind of changes. If you make changes, it can't exceed 1/5 of the gross area that already exists. Then if you create this alternative additional dwelling unit, that it can take up to 1/3 of the space, and it has to be at least 350 square feet. And that it can only be done on a conforming lot today. So there's some of the conditions. I mean, it's about a page and a half of stuff, but those are the basics. But now as we revisit this, we could make changes. So the very first one is today. You can just rent these things. You can't sell one. So the question is, can accessory dwellings in the future, can they be turned into condos and sold as separate dwelling units, or can they only be rented out? What are we going to propose? So any feedback on that?
Well, going back to kind of the reason that we're doing this, right, was mostly age in place and offering, I don't know if that's the only reason. That was the primary reason. So it seems like if you're building accessory places for you to live in.
Mm-hmm. And so you would or would not condoize them?
Well, I guess I think you should be able to, because you might want to sell your main building and still have a place to live. I mean, I'm certainly open to discussion, but I want to hear kind of.
I totally agree.
Okay, it's interesting. Any other inputs on this? I guess my perspective is, if you condoize it, it's effectively then a two-family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so then, we think about the distinction between an accessory dwelling unit and a two-family. I mean, it may come down to the dimensional requirements, but I always thought of it as also involving whether it was rental or condoized, because if you turn it into a separately owned unit, I think of it as a two-family. Maybe not a symmetrical two-family, duplex, but it's a.
Yeah, I think it's a really good discussion. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it tonight. So let's say you're living in the main house and you're able to make an accessory dwelling.
Yeah.
On the property.
Right.
So you're clearly moving out of the main house. You don't have to rent the unit because you still own it.
Right.
Okay, so then.
But you could create an income by renting it.
You could either rent the condo or not condo. You could either rent the accessory unit or the main building.
That's right.
Okay. And if you sold it, you would sell the lot and all of the structures on the lot.
If we don't allow
Right,
it
okay.
to be, yeah.
And so and I agree, if you were able to sell it, I feel like people would just flip it and build an extra unit, and you sell more things on the unit. So it's just a matter of like, if the property owner who would be moving into the smaller accessory unit would be selling the primary residence. I guess they conceivably could be renting the primary residence.
They could. Exactly.
Okay.
So,
And then-
So under zoning, that is a distinction.
Okay.
So if you have an accessory dwelling unit, it's an accessory dwelling, it's accessory to the principal dwelling unit.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's clearly, what is accessory, it's, it's the size, it's subordinate to the main dwelling,
Okay.
it's, it is rented, it's accessory to that principal use. The minute somebody's allowed to condo it
It's not a-
and sell, they're no longer accessory to
Okay.
each other. It effectively does make it a two-family.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I also think of two other things. One is the dearth of rental housing in Concord, the need to create rental housing. And then secondly, the opportunity for conflicts in neighborhoods that I think would be increased if the condoizing happens and it literally does become a two-family. That if it's rented, it's much more likely to be a kind of in-law apartment where there's some relationship among, and so there's less parking impact, less traffic impact. The other thing to note is that if you go towards you can condoize it, there's kind of no turning back at that point. Whereas, if we do the rental at first, we could always later on decide that, yeah, okay, we can add the you can sell it option. So
I can buy all of those things. I think
You can pick your tenant, you can't pick your neighbor.
yes.
And so that has been a position that many communities have taken when, yes, we are creating, additional dwelling units, and from a neighborhood standpoint, people who have additional dwelling units who are required to live in one of the units have a much higher, vested interest on, keeping the peace with the neighborhood than if they're just both property owners.
So I guess the question is, so on something like this, it's kind of complex. Maybe we could just go sleep on it in effect and come back to it next meeting. But if we have a consensus now, it's helpful just to, be, okay, check that one off and move on. Or is it the case that it's something, well, there are enough open questions, issues, you want to go talk with people, understand how you feel about it. So.
hearing your points, I would say I can agree that no, we at this point would not want accessory dwelling units to be turned into condos. I don't know if your mind was changed, but I'm just saying that's where I would lean now.
We can always add to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of convinced me.
Okay. All right. Well. All right. Question 1 done. Okay. Question 2, and I think it's kind of a similar thing. Must the owner occupy the dwelling or the accessory unit? They can choose between one or the other, but they can't just turn this into a boarding house, they can't just rent the whole thing out and leave. So in other words, it's owner occupied to have an accessory dwelling unit. I think that
the owner
today
has to occupy either
one or the other
dwelling or the accessory dwelling.
Right, and I think that that's required now.
Yes.
As it stands. So the question is, do we maintain that, or do we say you could have an absentee landlord type of relationship with this? You could move to the Cape, you could rent out both units and collect the income. Just as a theoretical.
The planning theory is currently somebody can buy a house in Concord, live on the Cape, and rent a house.
Sure.
The planning theory gets back to you're introducing basically another dwelling unit into the neighborhood, which does have some level of impact. Again, it's trips, it's cars, it's people, and having the owner of the property occupy one of the dwelling units introduces that vested interest to make sure that the neighborhood characteristics are maintained to a certain level.
And this would be throughout the town, by the way, this bylaw.
I guess maybe let's take this from a different direction. Because this already exists, is this something that has been brought up as an issue for those? So I'm kind of the mindset, if it isn't an issue now, it's another thing we could come back and change later if necessary. But it's not
mess with it.
Not mess with it if it's not an issue, and we can always address it later.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments? All right, number 3. So are there dimensional setbacks? Do we want them to be the same for an accessory dwelling unit as for the primary dwelling? And this question 4 I might as well bring up at the same time is if there's an accessory structure here, is there a height limit for it? And does it have to be attached? That's another thing we didn't put on this list.
Well, so.
Today it has to be attached.
And so this list was thrown together with all my notes over the past, I'm gonna say 2 years, just trying to establish basically a bulleted list or numbered list of items for each of your 4 or 5 initiatives to help start crafting an actual bylaw. So it's not in an orderly order of discussion. So I think when you, for number 3, you first get to the much higher level of question is currently under section 4222, accessory dwelling units are only permitted as part of the principal structure, the principal dwelling unit. The town does not allow the construction of new detached accessory dwelling units. You can have a detached accessory dwelling unit, you can create one under section 4221, but that is only for structures that were built prior to 1929, which is when Concord first adopted zoning.
Right.
So, while there are quite a few structures, detached structures, detached garages, barns, rather large sheds. The courts have said a chicken coop cannot be turned into, a 1,200 square foot detached dwelling.
I have a chicken coop.
Yeah. So for 4222, those 2 items I think are the number 1 question. Why is there a 2-year delay? If I want to, build a house in Concord and we have 4 kids and my parents, we're going to move them and so they'll take care of daycare. We have to build a house, we have to wait 2 years before we can build the accessory structure. Time-wise, building-wise, cost-wise, doing it while we're building the whole house all at once. So that's been definitely one of the constant comments we hear. And then the second one is, I have this detached garage that has this second, story partial loft. The garage was built in 1968. That'd be perfect to move, my mother there, who I just moved from Wisconsin 2 weeks ago, and he's living with me. But you can't do it.
Right.
So I think those are 2 higher level questions.
But related to that is,
once you get into that higher level question, so currently a detached accessory structure that is located behind the rearmost portion of the house can be located as close to 5 feet to the side and the rear property line. So if you get into, this is how zoning works, you can change one thing, but then it's the unintended consequences. So I think allowing smaller accessory dwelling units in detached structures is a very reasonable and logical and helpful thing for many, many people of different age groups. And the unintended consequences that currently you can have that detached accessory structure 5 feet from the rear and side property line. How does that relate to your neighbors? And you now have a residential unit on the 2nd floor. How is that person looking into the neighbor if they're only 5 feet from the property line? So, so that's where that
idea
number
of
3
having
came
a
from.
dimensional setback. So instead of having, an accessory setback of the 5 feet, and remember we at the last town meeting came up with height limits, right? So that does help somewhat to limit the height. It wouldn't have a 35-foot house 5 feet from the property line.
So I think the height limit is 18 feet.
But it's still high enough that it could be an incursion, on the neighbor's property potentially. So then you'd say, okay, do we restrict it to be, has to be the same as the primary dwelling's setbacks, which would be more like 15 feet or 20 or more, depending upon the zone.
But the unintended consequence with that is currently there's a lot of people that have really nice, detached garages that are, 5, 8, 10 feet from the property line. Wouldn't be great to have a small accessory
And they
dwelling.
don't look over anything. They probably don't look over many of them.
They still wouldn't be able to do this.
Right.
Because they're not gonna pick up the structure
So,
and move it.
so would that be a case where way down at the bottom, question 10, when would be a special permit required? So there's sort of like there's the yes, there's the no, and there's the special permit that's in between that says maybe. And so this may be one of those that falls into that realm, but then it becomes a ZBA issue. So.
So I framed the question for number 3. So I think the first question is, do you allow accessory dwelling units with detached accessory
Right.
structures?
So, question about those. What do you think about detached accessory dwellings, which currently are not allowed if they were built after 1928? So just think about it. You've got a house on a lot. Somebody, the bylaw passes, we allow the accessory detached dwelling, and someone puts up another building on the lot. And as long as they're within the setbacks, and by the way, I'm assuming we will still have the floor area ratio bylaw, the other kinds of maximum heights, all those things will still prevail. So they'll only be able to put up as much more building as still fits within those parameters. But they could just stick something up and somebody can move in.
Why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this? To try to enhance the housing choice options within town, have more affordable, mid-priced housing. That's the goal.
Within certain districts?
This accessory dwelling units concept, at least for now, we've been talking about as a town-wide opportunity.
So currently, by special permit, it's permitted in all residential districts.
Yeah.
But from a historic standpoint, so last July, the new comprehensive long-range plan was adopted by the planning board, accepted by the board of selectmen. That was a 2-year endeavor. One of the main focuses and issues, concerns that were provided was the issue of not just affordable housing, but housing choices and providing the variety of housing choices that allow younger families to move in, older people to stay in the community. And from that, this past town meeting, there's a significant consensus in the community based on the town meeting warrants that were passed dealing with housing choice and affordable housing. And this is one of the topics that has repeatedly been put forth by the community groups and citizens.
That they want to be able to rent accessory dwellings.
You can rent currently.
But there's so many restrictions.
Want to encourage.
Yeah. Want to encourage that.
People to.
Yeah, there's this nice article in the Concord Journal about a week and a half ago. You should take a look at it.
Okay, I got it.
So, and I'm not sure how that misconception started, that you can't rent an accessory dwelling. You can clearly, it clearly states
but it's hard to create
additional
one.
dwelling units to rent. So that's always been, a provision, but it comes down to these restrictions, and that deals with, the 2-year waiting period, that you can't be in a detached structure. So you start with those bigger issues, and then from there, these other questions become questions because of the unintended consequences when you change one thing in the bylaw. I have yet, well,
That makes sense.
other than
It's all
changing the
contributed.
Architectural Access Board to changing its name, you touch one thing in the zoning bylaw and it literally, affects many other things, so. And I think the other,
So what would be wrong with keeping the dimensional setbacks the same as the principal dwelling? I think it just limits.
It just limits the number, but it's a conservative approach for
Yeah.
sure.
And that because of the privacy issue.
Yeah.
I mean,
That
we can say something like if, for the existing ones, if you're going to change it to a dwelling, if you're going to put a window looking towards the side, then you need to have a setback. So that, I mean.
Can you
they
do that in the bylaw? Like it seems so specific.
so you,
There are some examples.
Yeah, so
if you're looking, you need to have a certain setback. If you're, yes.
so there's two ways to handle it, and I'm not going to try and get into specifics tonight because that makes it very difficult to draft bylaws on the fly. So currently, any accessory dwelling unit requires a special permit. So that's another one of those overreaching questions. If somebody goes through and meets all of the parameters, is that then are they just able to get a building permit and it's by right?
I thought that was one of our objectives.
Yeah, and if you don't meet the parameters, then you can still do it, but it's gonna be a special permit, and there's gonna be notification to abutters.
Right.
So that's a process question. If the board wants to look at that direction, then from a process standpoint, the bylaw currently does not limit the square footage of an accessory dwelling.
No.
Other than it can't be
More than a third.
more than a third of the gross.
Which I think is a reasonable definition of accessory. That at 1/3 of the size.
I think it would depend on the size of the existing
Well,
dwelling.
I mean, if it's a 12,000
So-
square foot house, you could have a 4,000 square foot accessory.
400?
Huh?
Oh, 12,000, yes.
Yeah, you could have a 4,000 square foot accessory dwelling.
So,
Yeah.
but.
But I mean, it's all relative.
But you
It's all-
think about it, but you think about I don't currently know what the average, or is it the median square footage of the house? But, you're talking about somewhere between 2,500 and 5,000 square feet. I mean,
Right.
it's, so a 5,000 square foot home, 1/3, you take 1/3 and you put that on the second floor of a detached garage that, I mean, I live in a 2-bedroom ranch. To me, that's huge. And if I was that a butter,
It'd be almost 1,700 square feet.
that's
Yeah.
bigger than my current house. So I think if you start with the first objective, do you allow by right and by special permit? If you allow by right, then I think you do need to say, you know what, it's gonna be.
These are the restrictions.
It's gonna be, 750 square feet or less. Or
750.
1,000, or, I mean,
Yeah.
you pick a
limit.
number, I'm not,
Yeah.
here's the limit. And if you wanna go above that, then you're kicked into a special permit and your abutters get to know.
Right.
If you want to put it in your existing detached garage that's 8 feet from the property line, and it's not 15 feet, then you need a special permit and the abutters get to know. But
Right.
if it is 15 feet and it's detached and it meets this, size, and so I think that's a reasonable approach. And
So would anybody
it would be
thought
trying to iron
about
out all those
a by right square footage maximum?
Why don't we make it so a lot of detached garages are 2-car garages that
Yeah.
have a pretty standard size. Let's be generous on that, and then whatever that works out to be, I think it's like 36 feet.
what are they, Alan, 24 by 30s?
24, yes, I was gonna say 36.
Standard garage is
24 by 25.
24 by 25?
Whatever it happens to be, we just say that is the threshold.
Well,
But that's for a detached.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we,
If you want to decide
so
to
that,
allow detached.
yeah, so that, the 24 by 25, that's, what, 600 square feet? Yeah, that's 600 square feet. That's not that big. I'd say it should be a little bit bigger than that by right. You could be able to do it 800. I mean, I'm comfortable with anywhere in the range of like 750 to
But I
1,000.
think the concept is you're saying that, you know, we're gonna pick whatever the current standard two-car garage footprint is.
So,
And say,
how's this? I will touch base with our GIS analyst and see if she may be able to run
The numbers, yeah.
I mean, we're talking just footprint.
Yeah,
Footprint of
existing accessory dwellings.
Accessory dwellings and.
Or
Yep.
detached units.
And
Yeah,
but from a bylaw standpoint.
buildings, structures.
The allow detached accessory dwellings, yes or no?
oh, I don't know.
What's the question?
Do you want to look into allowing detached accessory dwellings?
By right.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, we're just thinking about it.
Yes or no?
as a starting point?
As a
yes.
starting point.
Yes, I think
Yes.
that some of the best
So-
ones are those, and that, you know.
So
We could qualify
then
with
it's-
max square footage,
is-
max
is
dimensional setbacks.
A detached accessory dwelling is by right if it meets.
Right, and maybe the
That's
criteria is
parameters?
less for the detached ones, yeah,
I would say then it would still have to meet the dimensional setbacks
right, of the primary
of
dwelling,
the primary dwelling.
to be by right.
Right.
Okay. So, so we have by right if it meets the dimensional requirements.
Dimensional setbacks and dimensional requirements of square footage and
Of an
maximum
accessory.
height.
Of an accessory.
Yeah, so
I'm
you
not
already have
defining
a
that.
bylaw that deals with maximum height, and I'm
Right.
not suggesting that you touch that, and I'm
No.
not suggesting you get into any of the FAR.
Okay.
You keep that, so.
No, but
But we
it's
could-
included in the FAR, whatever additional structure you build.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're gonna end up with just a block of building, yeah.
Yeah, so the FAR is, is still in a requirement, it's still a dimensional requirement.
So are
Then-
these
so-
gonna be amended?
If you,
Yes, that's,
Okay.
so
Only,
that-
like-
that's what's gonna,
so
well,
you gotta
it'll probably
rewrite
be
the
a
whole thing?
rewrite.
Okay, yeah.
It'll probably be a rewrite, replace
I'll-
this with that,
So
and
this could
that's
be
Elizabeth's.
Yeah, no, that's fine, so I
World.
just wanna make sure that we
Two-story.
Yeah.
might say.
so Alan brings up, well, so if it's detached, you already are limited under the height requirement. If it's within the setbacks. If
Right.
it's outside the setbacks, or, so if it meets the setback requirements, it could be 35 feet tall.
Right.
With
Right.
the setback C.
But-
Yeah.
That's the same as the principal dwelling.
Right.
If it's an accessory dwelling, that's
Outside of the setback,
within the setbacks.
yeah, within the setback region.
Then you are limited to the current height,
Right.
which is 18.
Right, and then we would be also saying you'd also need to get a special permit to be
So if
able
you
to
don't
build.
That's
meet-
a-
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the other question. If you don't meet whatever the ultimate criteria, all of these criteria for by right, then is the intention to allow somebody to apply
Well,
for
you
a
wouldn't
special
be able
permit for a
to
waiver.
exceed you wouldn't be able to exceed the height, for example, because that's absolute. But if the bylaw allows an accessory building structure to be within the setback, then,
And you have an existing accessory.
yeah, then you should be able
So
to
we're only talking about
apply for a
setbacks.
special permit to make that a residential unit, I think.
So with the maximum height of 18 feet?
Yes, well,
If it's within the
Right.
So it's only a setback waiver. You can get a
That's right,
special
you can't get
permit,
a height waiver.
no height waiver, so it's only a
Right.
setback, so that
Yeah,
would be
and
somebody.
you're not gonna get a waiver on, well, we have a standard process for waivers on things like FAR, so. All the standard, I think all the standard dimensional stuff should apply, personally. Because that's what preserves neighborhood character, more or less. Any other questions on, okay, so I just want to move quickly down to number 5, we've talked about max floor, gross floor area somewhat. I don't know if we've got to finish, well, we're going to do some research.
I think we said we do want a max gross floor area, but we don't.
Right, we don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one is, are accessory dwelling units only allowed on conforming lots? Today, that is the case. Do we want non-conforming lots to be able to have accessory dwelling units?
Special permit.
I personally think that by special permit, they should.
So, you know, I'm just being devil's advocate. What's the reason? If they
Well,
meet
because
all
there's
of these-
so many non-conforming lots in Concord,
Well,
and they're non-conforming for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, but if you meet all of these, you know, requirements.
And you're on the
And it's all the, instead of being 20,000 square feet, you have a 15,000 square feet, but you're meeting all the dimensional requirements. It's, you know, less than, what's it, 750 square feet.
Right.
And you can fit in the setbacks.
And you meet the floor area ratio
Yeah.
requirement and the height, so
What's wrong with that?
why?
Oh,
why
you're
would
saying
make
why
them
do you
have
need a
to get
special permit?
Yeah, right.
Well, you're going to need to get a special permit anyway.
You're saying because you couldn't put on a
Because
non-conforming
you're going to
lot,
be
you need all this.
expanding, well, you're probably going to be expanding by 50% or more on a non-conforming lot.
But
I guess you only need a special permit if you are, right? So that will still happen.
Well, so here's the unintended consequence. So under section 7725, yep. 7125. Non-conforming single and two-family residential structures.
Yeah?
So, an accessory dwelling unit is not a single or two-family residential.
Sure it is. Well, it says two-family or additional dwelling unit, because that's what's 422.
No, but this is the section on non-conforming lot, non-conforming uses, which a non-conforming lot is a non-conforming use. If you expand a single or two-family residential structure, so I'd have to go back through, look at the definition, and see if there is a definition for single family residential structure, to make sure that it's implicit that an additional dwelling unit is considered a single family residential structure.
It seems like that language was written to anticipate that, but,
Oh, I don't think so, but.
well, I mean, otherwise it would just be single family.
No, well, but two-family, an additional dwelling unit is
Yeah.
not a two-family.
True, but the section 422 is titled two-family or additional dwelling unit.
Well, that's because it's titled that, because the section deals with, two-family. Under 4221,
Yeah.
a structure built before 1929, you could take a barn built in 1929.
It's
You
been
can
done.
actually get a special permit to make it a two-family. So it's not an additional dwelling unit, it's a legal two-family that somebody can condo and sell each one of them. So that's why this section 222 is labeled two-family or additional dwelling unit. This paragraph here deals with the ability to make a structure built before 1929 into a legal two-family.
Okay, well,
This section right here only deals with the ability to make an additional dwelling unit. So an additional dwelling unit,
in a single-family dwelling. So there we go, it's part of a single-family dwelling.
but if you now allow detached additional dwelling units, it's no longer part of the single-family dwelling.
So all you're saying is that in 722, we'd have to just also have a warrant article to just expand the
Right.
language of the reference there.
So you may not just be amending 4222.
Right.
You may have to amend other sections of the bylaw.
Sure.
To address non-conforming lots.
Okay. But back to the principle of the thing. I guess it gets, do we want to introduce a special permit criterion specifically for creating the additional dwelling unit on a non-conforming lot? Or do we not have that special permit criterion triggered except for the reasons that it already is triggered, which is over a 50% increase in floor area? Or also any construction that increases the non-conformance, right? Because that's the other issue, is that you get buildings that are already non-conforming that get pushed out. So I kind of like the idea of not requiring a special permit for that reason itself, but rather if anything else changes that would trigger the need for a special permit for non-conforming, that they should have to do it. Any other points of view?
So, would any of the reasons that it's non-conforming have anything to do with the impact of the use of the accessory dwelling? I mean, Elizabeth seems to say no.
Not the use per se, it's really the dimensional impacts, if any.
And the expansion by more than 50%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, that's a dimensional impact. Yeah.
So I'll think on that one, a little bit more. It's just thinking about. I think it's perfectly fine to allow by right on non-conforming lots. It's just thinking about how you make sure that you're not triggering something that has that unintended consequence.
Yeah. All right, then moving to 7. I think this one's fairly clear that basically, we're assuming that there's just one accessory dwelling unit that would be permitted on a lot, unless it's one of these grandfathered ones under 4.221 that already can do more than one. Any debate on that? Okay, then the next one, must the accessory dwelling unit be clearly secondary and subordinate to the principal dwelling unit? This would be kind of bylaw language that the ZBA would have to, find for if there was a special permit process or that the building
But, so, again.
permit would be issued
So you
based
have by
upon.
right.
Yeah, no, then the building permit would have to be based upon the judgment of that.
So you're kind of like the tree bylaw.
Yep.
You're now subjecting the building commissioner and his staff, what is, from an architectural standpoint, which they have no training or certain opinions on, what is clearly secondary and subordinate to the principal dwelling unit.
Or even worse, number 9, architecturally compatible with the surrounding neighborhood.
Well, secondary and subordinate seems to indicate location on the property with respect to the primary residence and size. Those two
Size,
things.
yeah.
So the size we're addressing, and to a degree, we are addressing the location of the property.
But with the setbacks and all
Right.
of that.
Maybe the signs can be more granular. We can specify the footprint. Like saying, for example, the footprint of the accessory dwelling should be the third of the main, rather than the square footage. Because, so rather than building a large one-floor accessory unit, so you cannot do that basically. You have to
Create a more compact
more
structure.
compact structure. So just adding footprint, I think, might make a difference. I don't know how to say.
Well, this points
Throw it
back
out there, I don't know how to stick yet.
Well, this points back to the possibility of a special permit process, but that kind of flies in the face of, because here on the planning board, this is the kind of determinations that we make all the time. But it also adds bureaucracy to the process, and the whole point of this is to try to encourage the creation of more of these units.
I thought we were just talking about how we would have sort of standardized square foot size that we would work with. And that would be can we do an up to X square foot or percentage of home, whichever is the lower.
Right.
And that's by right. You can do that.
And
then
so
anything
we're kind
beyond that, you need a special permit.
Right, so we're declaring that basically if you do that, that it's secondary and subordinate.
Right.
Because
It
it's likely to
defines
be.
it as
Yeah,
that,
that's
and
what it
then
is.
Anybody who wants
And
a
then
special permit
architecturally
beyond that.
compatible is a slippery slope.
Why is this to the surrounding neighborhood versus the principal dwelling unit? Like if you're mapped, like,
Right, yeah, so your principal dwelling doesn't have to be architecturally compatible.
You have like a
I mean,
modern looking-
you know,
Well, some neighborhoods are
we
very
have
diverse.
historic districts today that, you know, would deal with those most sensitive areas. And I think that there are proposals that the Historic Districts Commission is studying for neighborhood conservation districts where maybe additional controls should be put in place. But that is sort of, I'm using the word, orthogonal to the creation of additional dwellings. You know, it's look and feel stuff that, I don't know,
From a staff perspective, 9 is not feasible.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
think we should have.
I think we should probably not worry about it for
That-
now.
And then you've already answered 10.
Because that's been a question all the way around, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess, does that help? If
Yeah,
you think?
no, I can,
I would
I'll,
throw 720 square feet.
done.
720.
Because I was
720
looking and I was
gonna
like,
be?
a
Okay.
generous 2-car garage is 30 by 24. And so that would give you 720
Very generous.
square feet to build on top.
well, Nathan's going with 700.
I think that's a
Okay.
reasonable sort of
I'll
in-law
ask
I would round to
size.
750. So they get 350 to 750. But anyway, yeah, more. 719.
But that's how you get in the ballpark. That's how you can justify coming up with that.
Yeah.
So I'll ask Jill to see if she can assist me with, you know,
Good, getting some
the data for that.
empirical data for that.
She'll like.
Okay,
And
so.
then you would actually try to rewrite section 4.2.2?
I will.
Like, now?
Some red
You
lines.
have enough information to start
Yes.
that iteration process? Okay.
Yeah, and we better get started because we've
So
only
we'll-
just
So we'll pick some
So-
trees.
Does that seem too easy?
No.
Wow, well, that's good. 'Cause,
Well, that's because I started with the easy one.
Oh,
Yeah, these are.
although I think it could be the biggest impact on it. But so I think that the next step here is to think about process going forward, right? So we will need to do more homework. You saw that spreadsheet, that sort of kind of kitchen sink of stuff spreadsheet went out. If you think of things that you'd like to get answered or things that you feel like need to be done, it'd be great if you would add to that spreadsheet and submit back to Elizabeth, so that we can get, you know, more stuff on the table. And then should we schedule a discussion next time? Maybe specifically on, I don't know, which of the next initiatives do people want to do?
So that's a question, that the spreadsheet, you mean the checklist?
This thing.
The one that.
That thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we got
and
some-
actually I have a slightly updated version that I could forward.
So what, you know, ultimately, I think for each of your initiatives,
We need a list like that.
you create this key questions and topics list, and you go through and you get them answered, and that's what I need to be able to begin
Draft.
revising and drafting bylaw amendments.
so question, is this one that says two-family that you're gonna be rewriting for accessory, is that the only bylaw that addresses two-family right now?
No,
Okay,
well,
so there's a whole.
oh, as far as two families are not
Don't
permitted.
exist otherwise.
Okay,
So then we're
So
gonna have to
this
start
might
over on
even
that
get
one.
rewritten to separate it, and you might create something
A
that
whole
says
new thing.
accessory,
Yeah,
and then, Yeah,
Well, we'll have a
that
two-family, we'll probably have a
Yeah.
two-family section that's just about two families.
That might include that one about.
So what you would
Yeah.
probably have is you're gonna have this 4221
Right. As
would
part of
be
two-family.
expanded for, structures in place or built after
Okay.
the lot was placed in a single single residence district.
Well, in terms of determining what happens next, and thank you for writing the article as read, and I wasn't here last meeting, so I don't know what kind of good discussion you had, but did it come up at all, like in terms of priorities or what we really want to jump to next? And like you're saying, this one may have the biggest impact, so I'm glad we're talking about it. Did anything else kind of bubble to the surface that says, this might also?
Well, we haven't yet prioritized those others.
So I can give you an update. I touched base with MAPC today.
Yeah.
And they have not completed the review of their technical assistance program grant applications, which the board submitted for assistance with the Thoreau Depot redevelopment and TOD project. So
We can't really
Not
work
making
on that
that
one
one.
yet.
So, sadly, I think that one is gonna it will probably fall off and not, there won't be something for April 2020, just given the sheer magnitude of what completely rezoning the Thoreau Depot Business District
Would require.
So the other three are, the two-family bylaw amendment, and then the amendment to the PRD bylaw for walking distance and outside of.
Right.
That was one of the things that we left at the last meeting, was continue to try to define what that.
What walking distance was.
So I don't know if we got back to you, that there was gonna be some work on the maps of, isn't that where we left off? We were gonna get some different visualizations of.
Well, we got the walking distance maps.
Yeah.
Right, but that was gonna get sort of,
Tweaked.
yeah.
Well, you mean to like connect certain streets? That's the only thing I noticed. Otherwise, I thought it was pretty good.
Right,
It's like
well,
sometimes when they stopped on,
Right, and
there.
my proposal at the last meeting was just to say, call residence C close enough.
Which is resident C.
Well, so it's not shown on these maps, but you can go onto the GIS site and you can see residence C.
Okay. Right, and so get that
So-
what close enough is, and then put it out.
Basically, yeah, residence C is not exactly half a mile or less.
Oh.
But they're,
It'd be more
it's
defined.
pretty close, and it would allow us to obviate creating an overlay district.
Yes, now I remember what the request was. The request was the maps that we were using were from the Cafe Nero one. And instead of having just the
The
streets
walking
filled
distance.
out, that the adjoining lots would be shaded, so that we could more easily see it compared to the
Residence
residential
C,
district,
yeah.
yeah.
So the only issue with just defining residence C is that, so this is, Concord Center.
Yeah.
You would definitely include the business districts within Concord Center. But then just right down here, Main Street is Residence B zone district in the pink salmon color. So I don't think you can.
Oh, did you mean only define it that way, or are you saying?
I meant only define it with
Envision-
residence C
interesting,
because I
okay.
thought that section of residence B was
Oh,
not
I
one
see.
that was gonna take advantage of either the PRD or the two-family. Okay, it's just less likely, given the structures that are there today,
Huh.
that they would care about that, either one. In fact, they might very much care not to allow either of those. And then we had some discussions
So
where
that-
in West Concord, there was some residence B that was within half a mile. And so again, the question was, well, should that be considered? And it's basically right on the other side of the Assabet, that little triangle there. It's undeveloped at the moment, but, you know, it could potentially become a PRD. But then, you know, so would that be an in-town PRD because it's now less than, you know, half a mile? But if you also look, since it's got significant river frontage, and you look at the goal of the PRD bylaw is, you know, protect
Preserving.
these, especially riverfront views. I think that really should fall more into the criteria of our more outward PRDs, personally, if it ever became a PRD. So I think that Residence C is a pretty darn good approximation of what we want to achieve. Now, there are some areas of Residence C that are further than a half a mile, but they are, you know, bisecting in neighborhoods and saying, these guys in the neighborhood, they're part of this, and these guys in the neighborhood, 2 houses down, are not.
Right.
Seems weird. Okay.
I think the other part was that there was discussion whether half a mile was too short.
Right, whether
distance,
half a mile is half a mile.
and whether there was enough potential lots within Residence C that would even justify sort of going to the extent of having all these special exceptions for PRDs in that space if there's like 2 lots. that
There are only
could
potentially 2 PRDs
Yeah,
left.
exactly.
Yeah, so, and that is a concern. I mean, it's a built out, I mean, Residence C is very built out. But there's always, you know, we see them, things get carved out, like, what is it, like down at Damon Mill, is that still?
Yep, you'll see one.
Yeah, I mean, there's still lots down there that could go, so. Anyway.
Yep, you're gonna eventually see one for.
Right, there's gonna be a PRD there, that's at Residence C. Most likely, so. I guess the ones further down are in Residence B, so that's different.
Is that a PRD right there, the?
This one?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
that's a, yeah, existing
That's
condo
West Bell
complex.
Meadow.
Oh,
Right.
that's what's on.
And this is Riverwalk.
Riverwalk right there.
So there's gonna be another one in here.
Okay. So, I don't know, do we have more, I don't know, I guess we're still waiting for those revised maps or something for the
So
half-mile determination?
never made it back to me.
Yeah, I guess.
On revised maps, so,
We can talk about that.
yeah, okay.
Would we be using the same, we're using the same distances for 2-family and PRD, right?
Yeah, I
In
think
and
that
out of
was the-
town?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
That would be a
Yeah.
shared
Boundary
Yeah, yeah,
or definition of land, okay.
yeah. So, next time, do you want to focus on the 2-family then? Because it seems like the most related to the accessory dwellings is just the next step up, if you will. And then we'll try to go to the village PRD next after that. That's what I've been nicknaming them. I don't know.
So what would be helpful is just think of your little bulleted list and just fire off an
Fire it
email
off.
to me. And I'll basically create this same type of, you know, here's the key issues that you can think of, you know, for 2 families. And a lot of them are gonna be similar to,
Well,
to an accessory dwelling unit. But
and beyond just the bylaw drafting, I think too, there's all of the impacts discussion. So I think while we have bylaw language, especially with the 2 families, there's all these questions about, well, is there impact on schools, and on, you know, town budget and garages and, you know, all that stuff. So,
sewer connections.
yes, sewer connections,
Oh,
there's a beauty.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to keep those in mind as well. It's not all just about dimensions.
So I think from a process standpoint, you know, as you start thinking out, you know, so we're now in June, I think, you know, towards the end of July, it's gonna be, you know, the road show, where it's like, this is what we're thinking about for additional dwelling units and for 2 families, and go to the Public Works Commission and say, you know, here's what we're thinking, you know, right, I mean, if the Public Works Commission says, well, if somebody wants to do a 2-family and they have an existing single-family dwelling, well, they're gonna have to do, you know, an on-site septic system, or, you know, but having a discussion with them on the realization of what's the impact as far as our current wastewater treatment facility and the limitations under our groundwater discharge permit from DEP, and you know, is there capacity if we're now talking about just resident C? You know, I'll have Jill, you know, tell me exactly how many single-family dwellings, how many dwelling units are in the resident C zone districts. So,
Yeah.
so they'll at least have that
Right.
data.
We thought about looking at that for how many potentially could be 2-family buildings, 2-family dwellings.
Well, every one of them, why not?
So.
Yeah, but I don't
yes,
think that that's
like-
gonna, I don't think we're suddenly gonna
No,
wake
I know
up the
we're
next
not gonna,
morning
but I
and
mean,
like
so
everybody's
it's
gonna
not-
be turning their house into a 2-family.
I don't
But
think
it's,
so,
it
but
wouldn't,
if,
there's nothing that would limit it that you would see on the map.
no, I mean, it's either gonna be, you know, allowed by right or by special permit, and anybody can, you know, apply for it, so, you know, here's the worst case scenario, I mean, there's, you know, 2,000 dwelling units in the residency zone, I don't know how many,
Yeah.
but, yeah. So could you be, you know, worst case looking at,
2,000 more residents.
so again, it gets back into,
Amazing.
so you wouldn't be able to, I can see.
Our missing middle problem would be solved.
Does the long-range plan address capacity?
No. But, because that's under the town's wastewater planning study, which was done years ago. And that's a very specific, you know, type of scope study. An update to the wastewater, you know, treatment, the update to that plan would start with the long-range plan and work from there. But for the number of units, I mean, I can see likely for a 2-family dwelling bylaw, it's a single family dwelling on a single
Okay.
buildable lot, so it's
Mhm.
not, you know, all the
Nothing special for-
PRDs, you know,
Yeah,
all
they
the
wouldn't be.
PRDs aren't gonna be allowed to
Yeah.
convert
But
to.
otherwise, every single.
I think that we will be able to make that explicit. The PRDs will not be in scope, yeah.
But it's also, you know, it's not PRD or, and, you know, it's, is it gonna, can you have a 2-family dwelling, can it only be on a conforming lot?
What if it used to be 2-family and then became 1-family? And then, I guess this has to go on the list again.
If it used to be a 2-family and it became a
And became a
1-family and.
You make it back into a 2-family again if it's on a non-conforming lot.
So if you had a legal non-conforming 2-family dwelling and you converted it to a single-family dwelling, your protected right as a 2-family goes away.
Okay.
So what's the reasoning for PRDs not to be included?
Because that's a special permit process that specifically limits the number of units.
Yeah.
on the
They're
property.
designed to be
Right,
that
to
number of
the
units.
density.
Yeah, but
And that specifically deals with the, the density and
Septic tank.
they've already been,
parking requirements and all of those.
yeah, they've already been laid out with the idea of, you know, maximizing the density within a lot, you know.
But we did have information from one of the people that came and presented about how changing the density of the town potentially impacts population, right? Because I thought one of the questions we had was, well, when you create more dwellings, doesn't that automatically mean that you've got, you know, a higher population and more kids in school and so forth and so on? And I thought her answer was no.
Right.
That's not necessarily.
That's
so,
why
but-
these research
Yeah,
topics, we gotta
so
get solved.
Is that, is still research kind of that's coming to us? Because I think that's going to play an important part in our explaining our rationale and
Right,
recommendations.
I think that, I don't know if it's on this list or.
There's a
maybe
question
it's
that I
most
had, I
recent.
just
Yeah.
didn't know if you know who to talk to.
No, I'll have to ask. I can, you know, reach out to, so,
Well, that and cars, like number of cars, if we're supposed to be, you know, becoming more sustainable and walking and driving, if we are increasing, well, I don't know, I'll put it on the list.
yeah, so again, you
What,
know, we
garages?
can, you know, allow the conversion of a single-family dwelling to a two-family by special permit. You know, you can limit the size, you can say, you know, you can only have, you know, one parking space or one garage, or, I mean, so those are all those little, that's that bulleted list of questions.
Right.
Okay, does that conclude the discussion that we have for this topic? Okay, I think that before I open it up for just public comment in general, I wondered if there was any liaison reports or staff updates that,
I have one staff update, and the consultant for the Assabet River pedestrian bridge in West Concord is moving forward with developing their, we are planning a public workshop to get public feedback on location, preliminary design, options, alternatives. The public workshop has been scheduled for June 26th. That's a Wednesday. We are actually going to hold 2 sessions. It is going to be at the Hangar Cafe at 310 Baker Ave. And the first session will be at 4:30 to 6, and then a second session from 6:30 to 8. So we're going to try and get employees of the Baker Avenue area. Hopefully they can come to the first session, and then citizens can come to the second session. I mean, anybody can come to both, but they're going to be the same. But trying to really
what
get
was the date again?
June 26th, Wednesday, June 26th.
Great.
Exciting.
Yeah. So we're finalizing, you know, how it's going to work, but we may tap either Gary or Matt to do just a, you know, here's how this, you know, here's the history. It started with, it's in the West Concord Master Plan,
Yeah.
it's in our long range plan, and you know, actually it started in 2001 when Marcia and when I was here previously.
Wow.
Marcia and I got Ian Gillespie, the developer in Genrad, got redeveloped, provided $10,000 towards transportation demand management. That money was put into account, and it's now currently being used to fund the consultant for this project. So it's finally getting used, so we're super excited. So that's my biggest update. So hopefully gonna get an article, something in the paper for next week, and we're gonna start getting the flyers and maybe some notices and posters and everything out beginning next week.
Okay.
That's great.
Others? In fact, actually, do we need to make any new liaison assignments? That's a good question.
Yes. So one would be.
I mean, I'm currently the West Concord Advisory Board liaison and have done that for a couple of years now. Now with me doing chair, I mean, I'd be happy to throw off obligations as much as possible. So if anyone's interested in that, I mean, I don't know if Burton would be.
So Burton is current liaison for CPC.
Right. And he seems happy with that, but I don't know.
So that's for a scheduled period of time. I don't think you need to revote him at this time, but I'll have to check with the senior planner.
All right.
But so it would be for West Concord Advisory Committee, for HATS,
Right.
the Hanscom Area Town Select
Or, right, and Rob used to do that, and I know that, I don't think we've assigned anybody to, or we haven't assigned anybody to take that.
Yep.
And then the West Concord Advisory, I think those are the three main ones.
Yes.
So, I didn't know if there's any,
Or are you doing the climate?
you're doing climate action, okay?
Yes. I am pretty much at my limit for
Okay.
everything in the world.
Alan, you, hats is a pretty straightforward one.
That doesn't mean, does it mean once a month or
It looks like-
once a quarter?
No, 4 times. 4 times a year.
Once
4
quarter.
times a year.
It's
It's all these, the area, Hanscom area towns, so it's like Bedford, Lexington, Lincoln, and Concord. Oh, what?
Volunteer.
I'd be better at Hat than at West Concord.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if you think I'm too new to be able to.
No. No,
You just-
in fact, the new person, they get the job. They
Perfect.
get- That's
Slow,
perfect, yeah.
Slow start.
I don't, I live in Concord Center and I have more background in like infrastructure stuff than architecture.
Yeah,
So
but-
I would be better at Hat than West Concord.
Okay, go for hats. All right.
So
We're all set.
I think Nathan moved and,
Oh, I second it. Katie? Kate,
yeah. So
be the liaison, the half liaison.
hats.
Okay.
And, so, nobody for West Concord Advisory Committee?
I mean, I can keep doing
I
it.
think you're good at it.
Are they gonna start televising it? Because maybe you could just watch.
Watch from home. Okay, I'll just keep going for now, but
Yeah,
it's just something to
you
keep
can
in mind.
Is that a motion, Alan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Alan, did you want hats?
No.
What are you mentioning?
Okay, so Matt is liaison. And, yeah, I will check on the CPC.
To see whether,
And I think Nathan is in the same position, his appointment goes through till,
till next
I think,
fiscal.
next year, yeah,
Yeah.
so.
All right. Okay, so I think now that we're ready for public comment, do we have some general public comment? Well, I'll start with Tanya.
Thank you. Okay, I have a quick question on this sheet that says there is a joint meeting with ZBA to discuss proposals. Is that joint meeting of the two boards?
That's what
Or
we're
just-
hoping to
just-
schedule.
Okay, so but it is both boards?
Yes,
Okay.
both boards together. And the idea would be, we're proposing these things. Many of them, if they have special permit impacts and so on, they're the enforcing authority. We don't want to burden them unnecessarily or create a mess, so.
I'm glad there is a HATS person because we have been having some new disturbances. But on the other hand, HATS meets, I think, at the same time as the planning board on Tuesday evenings.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, really?
But I think so, but you may want to.
Gosh, I went to a meeting recently and I
was
didn't.
good.
Maybe it's an advisory committee thing.
Maybe it's a
I don't
different
know.
one.
Maybe it's a different committee. Yeah, I'm sorry. I might be wrong.
Well, Linda, who is on the select board,
No,
Yeah.
I'll send you all the
okay, but
information.
but you have a HATS liaison here.
Yeah.
Actually, a
I think
HATS select member is here. That's right.
I think I-
So you might be able to discuss with her, although I think you have relatively little experience yet on that, right? On the board,
Yeah, the meetings are topical,
yeah.
and, the next meeting, I think, is on transportation. So,
I think I'm thinking of the Hanscom Advisory Committee, and I think Rob Easton was on that one.
No.
No?
No, this is
I
the
think it
HATS.
was.
Hanscom Advisory
Oh, I
Board?
thought that's what I saw on the
Yeah.
webpage.
Yeah, this isn't, this is about common issues among the 4 towns.
Yes. but-
Which include Hanscom, but it can be a bunch of other stuff.
Wait, there is an advisory committee, and that was listing Mike
Yeah.
Lawson and Rob Easton, and Linda was on
We
the HATS.
can't, we don't
Anyway,
have much to say
whatever,
about
I
planes.
looked because of.
Yeah.
And the
So,
other thing I like to reiterate about just looking into the future, especially when PRDs are mentioned in general, is that at various times, various members of the Long Range Plan Committee mentioned and stressed that they were not advocating for development, but rather describing the types of development that would be more beneficial if they happened. So that's kind of slightly different than encouraging development. So I just want to, I was at many of the meetings, and various members with various interests, including members with development interests, would make the statement. So I just wanted to, this is a general comment.
You had a public comment?
Yeah, Linda Escobedo, Select Board, just speaking for myself. I just wanted to publicly commend you for the article that went in the Concord Journal and encourage you to use reprints of that for upcoming meetings with the public forums or when you meet with other groups.
Okay.
That I think would be helpful to see.
Yes, sir.
Stephen Bader, 7 River Street. A comment on the accessory dwellings. I know you don't like to have separate rules applying to what might be considered similar cases, but I see accessory dwellings that are not new construction, i.e. carve out of an existing building or conversion of an existing garage, as separate from new construction conceived and designed with maximizing the accessory dwelling loophole. I see them as different development issues, and I think if one set of rules applies to all of them, I think you'll get more unintended consequences than if you view the existing structure separately from new construction. Just my 2 cents.
Okay.
Let me, Mark Galis, 62 Prescott Road. Just one thing in passing, and it actually that what Stefan said kind of reminds me of it. One thing, also what Elizabeth said about unintended consequences. If you're allowed to build a garage and then a couple of years later turn it into an accessory dwelling, there might be some loophole possibilities there to consider.
Today's new building is tomorrow's existing structure.
So anyway, you know what I'm saying?
I think that that's where some of this 2-year business, first came into the bylaw, perhaps. Yeah. But so, yeah, we have a lot to think about there. I mean, and it's important to get feedback at this early stage because, I mean, you can imagine if we get towards town meeting, it's going to be all kinds of things people look at. Okay, so I think that concludes tonight's meeting. Thanks for coming out, and the meeting's adjourned.